Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm recording this on November 20th. Uh, the market has opened up. Right now, the S&P 500 is trading at about 5,870. The oil is trading at about 69.58. The US dollar relative to the euro. So the euro USD trade is at 1.05. So it's a little bit lower than the previous recording that we did yesterday. And VIX is trading at, it's a little bit elevated, it's trading at about 17. So right now we are seeing a little bit of a sell-off at the moment. Things could change, who knows? We're going to cover the news, but I want to go over something that Omnipore and company did with David Brooks. David Brooks is typically on PBS. I've seen him on PBS primarily, but I think he did an article in the Atlantic. I haven't read it, but this is talking about how the Ivy League education, I think it's titled How Ivy League Admissions Broke America. All right. And I want to go over this because I think it's a very telling observation by David. Now, David, I believe, is from the University of Chicago for his undergrad. And I think he has a similar take on what's going on with a Zoom call that I participated in 2 or 3 days ago. Maybe it was Monday, no, Sunday. I think it was Sunday. And Walter Isaacson, the writer, was having a conversation with Michael Sandler. I think that's his last name. And Michael Sandler is a professor over at Harvard. Now, they were kind of doing a post-mortem election analysis. What happened? What happened to the Democratic Party? Why did so many people vote for Trump? What's going on? Should there be a rethinking of the Democratic Party? And they were saying things that were very similar to what David's saying. Now, David is a little bit more conservative individual. Michael Sandler, is it Sandler or Sadler? I don't remember. I don't know if there's a D. It might be Sandler. He seemed to be a little bit left of center, maybe a little bit more center. Isaacson, I think, is a little bit more farther left, but he's not like AOC. He's definitely not a Republican. And he wrote a book about Elon Musk, but he doesn't even like Elon Musk. I guess they're having some sort of warfare with each other. But what is interesting is what Sandler was saying about how half of America is viewing the educated as elitists, and that they're breaking the system, right? Breaking America, not representing their values. Now, if you spin it the way I have been looking at it, all right, I've been saying it's about God, country, and family, not about education. It's about God, country, and family. I think people should be educated and get skills. And it's important to learn about history. Why? Because how are we going to learn where we're going if we don't know where we're from, right? So, learning history and having, some humanities in your education is important. Now, in the United States, most of that is in required courses in undergrad before you really start specializing in a particular discipline, right? So most people have to take X amount of coursework in humanities and in history and whatnot. And then you can do your specialty. I think most schools are like this, okay? So in college and in the university life, you do get exposed to quite a bit of humanities, but most people don't really care because it's not something that will translate into a job per se, right? I think it gives you some soft skills that allows you to do some critical thinking, but you can develop those soft skills of critical thinking with the discipline that you are focusing on too. But having a little bit of humanities in your academic career, if you want to call it a career, um, is important, right? And not just STEM. I think STEM is very important, but you got to build skills. And skills are in the humanities, in STEM, and also in making things. All right. I come from a background, Detroit, where automotive, you learn how to work on cars at a young age, you learn how to weld, you learn how to, build stuff and take stuff apart, learn how to paint, you learn how to, how to build a deck. There's a lot of stuff that you learn how to do, all right, at a young age, all right? And that translates into your adulthood as being able to fix things, being able to be more creative and build things. So individuals that only think that, well, it's just academia and that's going to give you success, I'm telling you, some of the smartest people are the ones that know how to manipulate material around them. All right. Building things, fixing things, but also having, if you have individuals that are only, they know how to build a house, but they don't know anything about the history of the United States, wrong. That's not the right way to go. If you have people that only know about history of the United States but don't know how to build a house, wrong, right? That's not the way to go. If you have people that only, getting into the more details here, only know how to design a car but don't know how to make a car, right? That's the wrong way to go. People that only know how to make a car but don't know how to design a car, the wrong way to go. You need to be more holistic, is the point I'm making. You need to be able to build stuff, design stuff, have an understanding of the humanities and history. Now, history is a big topic, and you can kind of focus on a particular era, but having history as a core component of your education, formally or informally, and the sciences. If you take this holistic approach, that's the right way to go. The problem is that in academia, they try to demonize or shun upon the industrial design, making things, designing things. But that's what America is. All right. And then that translates into the larger, that the larger things that we build in society are, at the consumer level, houses, cars, furniture, appliances, right? Utensils, tools, right? Um, landscaping. These kinds of things are very common. Electrical, plumbing. These are common, heating and cooling. These are common things that we do in society. All right. Then you can take it one step further, and then you can get into like satellite development, and rocketry, and and that sort of thing. Even computers, in the consumer level, so electronics, consumer electronics. All right. But when you're doing that, you need designers, you need people that build stuff, and you need tools, and you need some level of expertise, right? And apprenticeship and skills to develop that, right? But if you demonize people that are doing that, then you're demonizing a big fraction of the society. And I think this is what's happening in academia. Now, I think that there's a change that's happening. I'll bring that up. So back when I was when I was young in my 20s, it was more engineering track, business track, or pre-med track or, pre-law track, right? And maybe that's even today. All right. And the ones that are like more focused on the medicine or law, they kind of stayed away from knowing how to do something, except in medicine, the ones that know how to do are like the orthopedic surgeons, know how to build stuff, know how to cut stuff, right? Or surgeons are more like engineers in a way. Um, so so the point I'm making is that when you're in school, you kind of like separate and you kind of demonize industrial design. You demonize manufacturing. And that in the 90s was a part. Finance was also a part of it, but a part of moving unwanted jobs overseas and moving the manufacturing overseas. So that's happening in the 90s. So you go through the 2000, 2010, 2020. So you have about 30 years or so of globalization where you have a big part of society that doesn't know how to do design, industrial design, and manufacturing. And I'll tell you, industrial design and manufacturing is where it's at when it comes to a productive society. You can't be a productive society with just a bunch of lawyers. You can't be a productive society with just medicine. You need industrial designers, all right, and you need manufacturers. So I think what's happening in the current landscape, the current zeitgeist, is you have an elite group that's still focused on this idea that manufacturing, industrial design, building stuff is kind of a lower class or an older world, and that we're a service world and we don't like getting our hands dirty, kind of thing. All right. Case in point, most people are, trying to get into these elite schools, and they want to, go into finance. They may get a STEM degree, let's say engineering. This is very common on Wall Street. They may get an engineering degree in, let's say, electrical engineering, right, or chemical engineering, and they actually work on Wall Street to manage a hedge fund or manage, some sort of portfolio. Portfolio management is not that complicated. Chemical engineering is complicated. All right. Anyone, having that skill set to do chemical engineering, but then only deploying your skills into portfolio management, yeah, they could be making more money doing that, but that's not really that more beneficial to the society. That chemical engineer doing chemical engineering is going to be more beneficial to the society. Managing the portfolio may be more beneficial to the individual because of the way the cost structures are, and the compensation package. So what's happening is that you have people that are smart that are going to these institutions, Ivy League and Ivy League Plus, and they're not really deploying their intellectual capital into making the society more productive. They're deploying their skill sets in managing a portfolio, right? And that's not really, that's not very, I don't know, I don't think it's that very productive. It's not that hard to manage a portfolio. I did it, all right? It's not that hard. So so that's kind of like the what was going on in the 90s, 2000s, 2010, and then I feel as though there's something changing in the society. Okay, we're at a point where you have half of America that doesn't like the elitists. The elitists don't like manufacturing. The elitists want globalization. The elitists, are pushing climate change and reduction of your carbon footprint, but yet they still live high on the hog. And people, what's happening now is that there's kind of like a fracturing globalization and a resurgence in localization. That means there's going to be cottage industries, and there's going to be more people that are going to be entrepreneur. They're going to be more of an entrepreneur mindset, and they're going to start making stuff. Now, it's going to be all over the place. It could be in cooking. It could be in, the service sector. It could be in manufacturing. It could be, but a lot of little businesses are going to start to be formed. All right. And this whole kind of this idea of what's your skill? Now, if you watch some people that are into fashion, not so much fashion, but like design, like fashion design. All right. And, I'm noticing this on some blogs, vlogs that are related to menswear. There are individuals that are in their 30s. Some of them are even there in their 20s that want to know how to make high quality shoes. Now, to make a shoe is complicated. There's a lot of steps. And to be able to not only just to make it, but when you're taking a design and getting that first run and then having to tweak it to make sure all the folds and all that is the way the design was intended. So there's a tweak to it. In mold making, you did a first run on a tool, and you would have to spot it. What's called spotting, and you'd have to tighten up to prevent flash from being formed on the parts. So there's a tightening aspect to it. There's a skill. All right, picking the right materials, how to cut it, procurement, all this stuff. People are getting in, and they just want to make shoes. They want to make high quality shoes. That's something back in the 90s, it was like, well, you go to an elite school and just go, well, I just need to have a spreadsheet to figure out how much it's going to cost, itemize it, and find a vendor that's overseas, and then to ship it, and then have a marketing strategy to get to my point of sale. But they miss that innovation of actually making the shoe and having, being close to the actual creation of the product. And then when you do that, you are learning other things that you can do with shoes, or tangential things through the process where the shoe making ends up creating leather bags or creating something else. You don't see that on a spreadsheet. It's not as easy to see on a spreadsheet. We don't build the skill sets of innovation through a spreadsheet. There's the change. So what's happening here is that what David Brooks is saying is that we have elite institutions that look down upon people that are making stuff, designing stuff, but yet that's what the economy needs to grow. Now, we need educated people. We don't want a bunch of knuckle draggers that only know how to make shoes, right? We want people to be educated and, cordial and move the society forward. But to only focus on this paper pushing elite group and not, and that group isn't really paying attention to the importance of manufacturing and industrial design, then we're not going to be as productive as society. And when we're not as productive as society, there's going to be the have-nots and the haves. And there's going to be strife in between these people. So to make the society more productive and peaceful and forward leaning, we are going to need people that are more focused on being holistic. You need to be educated, and you need how to make stuff. You need to know how to design stuff. Let's say a physician only knowing how to diagnose a disease, but not having the bench experience to being able to further along treatment for that disease. That type of physician that doesn't have bench experience is not a very good physician. And the same thing, if they only have bench experience, but no clinical diagnostic experience, that person isn't as good as in medicine as one that has some sort of dual function. Now, the elitists would kind of like almost they silo both. They silo those. But we need holistic education. We need people that are competing in sports, so you learn how to be a team player. And also you're just fitter. You're just physically fitter. The society would be physically fitter because they're going into their 20s and the 30s with a lifestyle of fitness. So that people need to look at this holistically. Now, where the problem is right now is that the Ivy League and Ivy League Plus, the people that are coming out of that are focused on, they are getting more educated, and a lot of them are getting high positions in politics and in finance. And what happens is that there's kind of a positive feedback loop within those social circles where they pick individuals that are from the same ilk, and and then it's self-feeding. So they go to the same schools, their children go to the same schools, and and then the kid does the same thing that daddy did and work on Wall Street, right? But that's not making society as productive. We need people that know how to make things and design things. Design, industrial design is really important. But understanding finance, understanding economics is important too, because that's kind of the pulse of society. So, maybe, I look at this a little bit too deeply, but I think that society in the United States, people need to be more holistic. Not just the humanities, not just STEM, not just paper pushing, but also manufacturing. Not just manufacturing, though. There is people that are saying that there are people that are just not educated that are in manufacturing. That's true, but there are people that are educated that are in manufacturing and industrial design. They're maybe even smarter than the ones that are just the paper pushers. Highly probable. All right. So the way forward is for kids to realize, be holistic. But there is this divide in the United States at this moment in time between the have and the have-nots, the elitists and the non-elitists. And this was part of that 50-50 split in America, where you have the Democratic Party that represents now the wine and cheese elitist, and you have the Republican Party that is representing a non-paper pushing America. Now, where some of these individuals get it wrong is they think that it's just the uneducated or primarily the uneducated that voted Republican. I don't believe that for a second. Like David Brooks, he has 1 degree, right? So my education is almost 5 times more than David Brooks. I voted for Trump 3 times. I'm highly educated. Not only that, highly experienced in multiple fields that are very hard. So, and he's a journalist. Now, being an engineer, I'm sure is a little bit harder than being a journalist. All right. Studying HIV is a little harder than being a journalist. All right. So it's really important to understand that. Highly educated people did vote for Trump and support Trump. That doesn't mean that Trump is all perfect. He's not. But the thing is that to make America better, We need to look at this holistically. And there is an elitist situation that's happening, and it's not going to be fixed right away. But I believe that America's moving in the direction that the next 250 years is going to be very, very prosperous. It's going to be bumpy. There's going to be bumpy roads, just like we had the last 250 years. But we're moving on a journey that is profound, profound. We're living in a time that's very, very interesting and energetic. And if you are truly listening to what I'm saying, and you look at life in a holistic manner, where you're looking at the humanities and STEM, and understanding, and not just pontificating, but understanding what's going on in the society and being able to manipulate the material of the world and make stuff, that's going to move the economy forward, and that's going to build businesses. That's going to allow our GDP to grow and to be able to be more prosperous, and to be able to afford some of the things that are really important, like supporting our veterans, so in our elderly, but there is this elitist thing that's happening, and it can be corrected. It can be corrected. All right, and that's not to demonize industrial design and manufacturing, because that's the backbone of America. That's the backbone of America. So before we start with David Brooks on his, and I agree with a lot of stuff that he's saying on his assessment here, but I think that we need to look at this thing holistically. If you educate the youth holistically, starting in grade schools and into college, we're going to have a very prosperous future. Instead of thinking, demonizing design engineering and manufacturing. Don't demonize that, because that's the backbone of America. But before I do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support my work. You can help support my work by donating on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I have thousands of videos for free, but it's through your donations and your paid membership on Patreon that helps this channel. So please, if you could, please donate. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee, or be a paid member on my Patreon channel. All the links are in the description of this video. You can donate Stripe, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee on my website on the homepage at the very bottom, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Make sure you subscribe to all those channels. I do get strikes periodically on YouTube, but I continue to do my premieres to try to get your feedback, in the chat. All right, and I think that's important. Now, and then I also have products. I have different products in my store. I have ebooks. I have 8 ebooks. I have classes on pulmonology and immunology, so you can learn about those subjects for very low cost, only $50. And I have great supplements, very high quality supplements. And to help support my work and to help support your health, get those supplements from my store. I tell you how to stack it. I tell you how I take these supplements and how to slow down the aging process and to improve my immune system and improve my health. And if you follow my lead, you could see similar results, because a lot can be learned from preventative medicine. A lot can be learned from people that have been doing these anti-aging and longevity protocols. I've been taking antioxidants and being very vigilant with supplements since I was 16 years old. I'm a lot older than 16 years old now, all right? But there's been a compound effect with tweaking these stacks and tweaking, what type of supplements to take. And so I inform you what I do, and I give you very high quality supplements on my store. So please go to my store, help support my work, and help support your health and follow my protocols. Some of the things that you can get on my store are very high quality deodorants. A lot of people think, well, just get a Procter and Gamble, deodorant. No, you want to get something that is natural. All right. I have natural deodorant here. This is a citrus version, and this one here is peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. I've partnered up with Rainbow Herbals, who makes these. These are made from essential oils from the Himalayas, very high quality ingredients. It's a deodorant for males and females. Use it every day, but it also helps to detoxify your body. So it's a dual purpose. I believe in providing dual purpose products. In addition, this has no aluminum in it and no baking soda in it. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get these very high quality deodorants for males and for females. Get a couple bars for your household. Help support my work and help support your health. Detoxify your body and get a very high quality deodorant in citrus and in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. All right, so let's play how the Ivy League admissions broke America. All right, it's a real thing. What's happening here? You have an elite group and you have a non-elite group. But the reality of the situation is the non-elite group is the backbone of America. And there are a lot of people in the non-elite group that are very smart. And they're pushing forward. But we need to realize that globalization has been hurting America in the long run and making the elites very rich. And we need to go to localization, start building businesses, and revving up our economy. This is the future of America. We can do it. We can forge the future.
Has highlighted a distrust in American institutions. Many working class voters opted to vote Republican due to the reputation of Democrats being the party for the educated elite. So what's led this divide? For the Atlantic's December issue cover story, contributing writer David Brooks argues that the dysfunctional system of meritocracy is largely responsible and needs to be redefined. He joins Hari Srinivasan to discuss further.
Yeah, thanks, David Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. Your recent cover story in the Atlantic dives into how essentially we have created a system of meritocracy that isn't working. It's created a diploma divide in America. You write, the meritocracy has provoked a populist backlash that is tearing society apart. Today, the most significant political divide is along educational lines. Less educated people vote Republican, and more educated people vote Democratic. So how did one lead to the other?
Well, the diploma divide, the political divide, grows out of a deep cultural divide. And so increasingly people with college degrees...
And it's very important that the assumption, which is the wrong assumption, the assumption is that people that are educated make better decisions, especially when it comes to voting. Perhaps a lot of these educated people are brainwashed. And they're actually, they are just giving they're giving up their free thinking to some sort of oracle, in the establishment. And whatever the oracle says happens to be, must be true. If CNN and Jake Tapper, who went to Dartmouth, says that something is true, then it must be. Well, maybe the quote uneducated or the non-elite are a little bit more free thinking. See, I think it's wrong to assume that people that are uneducated formally are not free thinkers. But, let me stop talking. I'll let David talk.
with high school degrees are living in different worlds. People with high school degrees die 8 years younger. They're 10 times more likely to die of opioid addiction. They're much more likely to be obese. They're much less likely to marry. They're much, much more likely to have kids out of wedlock. They even have fewer friends. 24% of high school grads say they have no close friends. And so they're living, we have created two different Americas. And we created that unintentionally, but on purpose. Over the last 70 years, we created a world in which people who do really well in school.
There's a fine tuning of this. All right. You have educated, Ivy League plus, educated non-Ivy League plus. And then you have the uneducated, which is just high school or maybe even dropped out of high school. All right. There's a divide even within the educated between the elite Ivy League and Ivy League plus and the non-Ivy League. All right. So just keep that in mind. And that group, right, has also voted for Republican. Right. That's the key. He's right at this moment in time, he's only focusing on the high school or high school dropout. But there is a non-Ivy League group that has discontent on the government that's highly educated.
To go to fancy colleges, marry each other, invest heavily in their kids. They get to go to fancy colleges. They move to the same 10 or 12 cities, Austin, San Francisco, Washington, and they've created an inherited caste structure. And 50% of America takes a look at this and says, you educated elites, you have too much power. And by the way, you're not all that competent. So we're going to revolt. And that's what Donald Trump is all about.
You know, you kind of go back into the history of the Harvard president almost 100 years ago. How does that translate into this situation that you're describing?
Yeah, the guy's name was James Conant, and he inherited a situation, which was getting into Harvard was super easy if your dad went to Harvard. Harvard and Princeton and Yale and schools like that were for the Protestant establishment. And so the ideal in those days was to be a well-bred man. And you didn't want to study hard. Academics were not important, but you had to be socially polished. And he decided that's ridiculous. We can't enter the 20th century governed by the dim-witted children of Mayflower families. We need a new kind of elite. And he had great faith in the power of IQ tests and in the power of GPA, getting really good grades. So he said, we're going to pluck all the smart kids from all across America. We'll bring them to places like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and they'll run the society really well.
Now, there's a backstory on this. All right. This is happening in the 1930s. But the thing is that it was still pretty easy to get into these schools because of legacy, going all the way into the 1980s. All right. I mean, I'm not sure when Kushner went to Harvard. I think it was the 90s. But Kushner's father paid for Jared Kushner, to go to Harvard. I mean, at the tune of $2.5 million. It still happens. All right. The point I'm making is that even though there was a push to try to be more meritocratic in the 1930s and onward, from 1930s to all the way to the 1980s, it was relatively easy to get into the Ivy League compared to today. The average person that got into the Ivy League during that time period, if they applied to today's standards, they wouldn't be able to get in. More than half of the alumni would not have been able to get in. The same thing with medicine. It was easier to get into medicine before 1995. A lot harder to get into medicine now. It was easier. Like you listen to doctors like like Malone or Penny or or even McCall, pre-genomic doctors that went to medical school in the 80s or 90s. All right, most of them wouldn't be able to get into medicine today. So when you look at these doctors, all right, they that are older. And yet experience is important, but a pre-genomic doctor, before the genome was mapped, they don't have the molecular biology experience. They don't have the immunology experience, because all that was post genomic revolution. So the bar for these, the bar to get into law school, good law schools, much harder. The bar to get into, elite institutions, Ivy League and Ivy League plus, much harder now than it was 20 years ago. Same thing in medicine. Everything, the bar is just so much harder to get in. So, there's more assessment tests, there's higher scores, higher GPAs. So it creates a lot of stress for these kids. So what happens is these kids are honed at a young age to try to be good test takers, but they don't know how to build stuff. They don't know how to design stuff. They don't have the creativity. Mark my words, I've seen this whole arc through these different generations, because I, have had multiple degrees, and I've interfaced with these different generations, going from Gen X all the way to millennials. And I'm telling you, the younger generation, they're not as creative. They don't know how to build. They don't know how to design. They're focused on testing. They're only focused on testing. So when you're giving them a new problem that they have to figure it out, it's not in the book, they fail. They fail miserably. And so they're so honed in on being able for assessment testing. Now, maybe I'm biased. Probably the best generation is Generation X, other than the greatest generation that fought World War II. But, Generation X is, a close second. All right. Definitely not the baby boomers, and definitely not anyone that came after Gen X. There's a creativity about Gen X. We did have a foot with technology because of the implementation of the PC, personal computer, when we're in like grade school, right? But we also had a foot in the personal computer, where you actually played outside and built stuff and blew stuff up, and and played on the playground instead of just doing video games. So something's changed with these kids. The pressure for these children that are going, they're coming from a good family that wants them to go to a good school because their parents went to a good school. And so there's a social pressure. The parents have money, so they're getting tutoring, and they're doing extracurriculars like violin and lacrosse and all this stuff. And they don't have time to be kids. And so they don't become creative. They don't become they're not social, they're antisocial in a way. So they can perform better on a test. But when you get them out of these schools and you're in the real world, they don't perform. They're not good performers. Now, they're going to go into here, when it comes to consulting, that there's not a difference between an Ivy League and a non-Ivy League educated person. I have seen it. All right. An Ivy League educated person in engineering doesn't perform as well as a non-educated Ivy League person, and not even close. I mean, it just the creativity, because the reason being is that the pressure, there wasn't pressure while they were kids, so they were able to learn through experimentation. They were able to learn by doing. They weren't focused completely on a test assessment and taking a ton of AP classes. So when a big problem comes up, the elitists can't solve it. And the original thinkers can. Because the way they were brought up, they had time to think. not just do.
Apparently, he was creating a new elite. The problem with his vision was that rich families learned to game the system. And the second problem with his system is he didn't have the right definition of human ability. For him, it was all IQ. And IQ is important. It really is. If you want to be an astrophysicist, probably important to have a high IQ. But those of us who, live life know there are other things that are more important. Being curious, having a passionate drive, being a good teammate, agility, knowing how to move in life so you're graceful toward other people and decisive toward yourself. And so all these traits, which were hard to measure, got locked off. And so we not only created this elites, this inherited caste system, but it's not that competent because it doesn't select on the basis of what are the real skills in society.
Is it okay to ascribe this current situation to the meritocracy and the amount that you do? Meaning, are you, David Brooks, giving enough credit to the social policies that multiple administrations have come up with that might have exacerbated the very, dichotomy in America that we're describing? Is it all the meritocracy? Aren't other things responsible for this as well?
I'm monomaniacal about this, so maybe I oversee it. But I would put it this way. A lot of the social policies grow out of the assumption of the educated class. I'm a member of this educated class. I went to an elite school. I teach elite schools. I'm deep in the system. But we decided that in moving to a post-industrial society, we need to create all Americans to look like us. And so you had a whole succession of presidents with education policies, where the policy was designed, we're going to funnel all kids into college, four-year colleges, because you need a college to get the, quote, jobs of the future. And then look at our immigration policy. Our immigration policy, we're going to relatively open borders. That creates cheap labor force for those of us in the educated class, but a lot of competition for those more working class folks. Look at our trade policy. We're very tolerant of free trade, which is what the market wants. It's very efficient. But it meant a lot of the jobs got shipped overseas, and not my job as a journalist. That didn't get shipped overseas, but a lot of other people's jobs.
When I was growing up, shop class was an option. And now when I talk to younger people, they're just like completely flummoxed by the idea of going to something that would teach you carpentry and welding at high school, right? But we as a culture decided that, well, those were not really even tracks that we wanted to invest in for secondary or primary education.
Yeah, we used to train on lots of things in schools. Shop class was one thing. We used to have more arts education. There used to be things called the Courtesy Club, where people were taught social skills. Now we do a little of that through social and emotional learning, but not as much as we should. And basically, we just took one form of intelligence, the ability to do well in school, and we said, that's the thing that matters. If you can get straight A's, you're the kind of person we want to promote. And by 9 or 10 years old, kids know. They know either the school thinks I'm a smart kid, in which case I get put into the pressure cooker, or the school thinks I'm a dumb kid, in which case I'm probably mentally checking out. And it's just wrong to be sorting kids at that early age, especially by a very narrow and bogus criteria. One of the problems with the meritocracy is it's based on a non sequitur, that doing really good at school is the same thing as really doing really good at life. And that's not true. The relationship between your high school and college grades and your life outcomes, that correlation is essentially trivial. There was a study done, somebody looked at thousands of cases where people were fired from their job. Why were they fired? In only 11% of the cases, they were fired because they lacked intelligence or technical skills. In 89% of cases, it's because they were bad teammates. They were hard to coach. They didn't try hard. They weren't calm under pressure. And so these are things which the scientists call non-cognitive skills because they're hard to count. But to me, they're the most important thing in life, and our schools have sort of shunted them off to the side.
What is the problem with this somewhat simple idea, and I think it's stayed around because it's a simple idea, that, number one people go to number one schools, that there is a purpose in having baseline standardized measurements where we can sort.
Yeah, well, it just doesn't. Number one people don't necessarily go to number one schools. Having a high IQ, as I said, is good. If you have a 1600 in SATs, that's going to help you in life. It's going to probably lead to higher jobs. It's probably lead to higher incomes. But there was a study called the Terman study that looked at super smart people over their lifetimes, and they did fine. They were doctors and lawyers. These are like top 1%, but none of them were geniuses and none of them were creative. Intelligence is not the same as creativity. Intelligence is not the same as good judgment. Highly intelligent people are really good at persuading themselves their own false ideas are true. And so you need a lot of other things aside from that. And so to me, so you look at a study of, somebody did a study of students and they gave them a bunch of consulting problems, like as if they were in a consulting firm. And the Ivy League kids did only a tiny amount better than the other kids. And so, for example, Adam Grant took the results of that study and calculated that a Yale grad in these consulting problems did about 1.9% better than a grad from Cleveland State. And that's not a big difference. And so the parents of high school juniors think that there's an awesome difference between Princeton and Penn, or between, Penn State and Penn, or between Williams College and some other college. But
there is no difference between Harvard or Penn or Yale and Harvard or anything like that. And I think that there is a big difference between Ivy League and non-Ivy League. I personally believe that that the average state school education is a higher indicator of being a more successful person than being at the Ivy League. It's a canard to think otherwise. Now, we're told in the society that an Ivy League education is the best. There are some people that do very well when they come from an Ivy League education. But when you look at the total alumni, they're not doing any better on average than a good state school. When you look at the total alumni. Now, you do have outliers that are doing far better than, let's say, some of the outliers, in state schools. But when you look at the average, no. And from what I saw in engineering, and what I saw in medical education, the ones that are coming from state schools actually do better.
This is a status system that really has no correlation in reality.
Okay. I have many college administrators in my time reporting on higher education who are happy with the U.S. News and World Report rankings and how disproportionate that number factors into how prospective parents think, right? But there is definitely, an idea that has crept in and been established in the minds of those parents is that, look, this is the system that has created this American society for good, as well as the things that you describe, right?
Yeah, I mean, I as I say, I went to these schools. I now teach at one of these elite colleges. I taught for 20 years at different elite colleges. I find them awesome places, filled with awesome people. And the people currently in them are not the problem. The problem is that they're part of a system that was established 70 or 80 years ago, and we're all stuck in the system. And most of us are not happy with the system. So a lot of parents think there's too much pressure put on their kids in junior year in high school and senior year. But they can't, you know what?
Student suicide attempts up because of the pressure. The amount of money that has to be funneled in to cultivate these students. On the back end, these students aren't as creative because they don't have downtime to make friends and play in the in the backyard. So I think that over time it's creating a big problem. I disagree with him that the ones that are in these institutions that are teaching, a big part of it at this moment in time, way too liberal. Not enough balance between a conservative staff and a liberal staff. Ideally 50-50. The problem is it's like 95-5, 95% liberal or ultra liberal and 5% conservative or centrist. so I think faculty composition is a big problem. And the pressure cooker is preventing these students from being creative, and the pressure cooker is preventing them from living a good life. And so what happens is they get out of these schools and they feel lost. They go to, let's say, these good, let me give you an example. They go to a good school, all right, and Ivy League, all right, they get an engineering degree, and then they go to Wall Street. They're not using their engineering degree to do management of a portfolio or something. They make some money doing it, all right? You also have people that are getting, let's say, a history degree, right, from these Ivy Leagues, thinking that they get into investment banking, and they don't get picked because they don't have, I don't know, some quantitative skill, and they're having a problem getting a job. So there is this thing that no one's talking about. Individuals coming from the Ivy League that have a non-STEM degree that can't get employed. Now, if you have good connections and you have family members that are already in, let's say, the finance world, you can get in as an intern with a non-STEM degree. But what if you don't have that connection? That's a big problem, because there are people that are underemployed, even with an Ivy League degree.
They disarm because the neighbor down the street might be being a tiger mom and making sure her kids compete, so that you can't unilaterally withdraw. The admissions officers I know at universities, they don't like the system. They'd love to create a class that is based on a wide variety of abilities, but they have to worry about their exclusivity, about projecting a certain number of people. They have to worry about the U.S. News rankings. They have to worry about what the median SAT score is. And so they are trapped in the system. The teachers I know don't like teaching to the test, but standardized tests have become such a main force of this system that that they have to teach to the test. And so to me,
and this is just at the college level or the university level. This is the same problem that's going in law and in medicine. They're teaching to a licensing test and not teaching doctors to be doctors. It's a big problem. Medicine is broken because of this issue. Let me repeat, medicine is broken because of this issue.
Only way we're going to fix the meritocracy is change the definition of merit. Okay, let's just take David Brooks's idea, run its course here. Next year, the admissions counselors at the top 25 schools want to say, all right, how do I implement this, right? If I want to de-emphasize the IQ or the test score, and I want to start measuring for these things that Brooks is outlining, right? Courage and grit and a sense of purpose and how good of a teammate you are. So how do we start to think about restructuring the system and measuring appropriately?
Yeah, first we need to make schools not the sorting system on society. You can't tell a person's potential at age 18. You just can't. And so you're creating a bogus system. The second thing is one of the problems is our high schools and elementary schools and middle schools oriented themselves to feed into this system where grades, AP tests, and SATs are really what matter primarily. But some schools have ways of doing education that's different. And one of the models I described, and they're all out there, and I find most teachers I talk to love these models. They'd love to transfer to this kind of model. So for example, one kind of this model is called project-based education. There are no grades. There are no class periods. You're part of a team, and you're given a big project to work on. So there's a school called High Tech High, which I happened to recently see a documentary about. And some of the students there were in a team, and they had to analyze, why do civilizations decline? And then not only had to analyze it, they had to build this big wooden gizmo with levers and ears and charts with all the different factors that feed into civilizational decline. So they were thinking about a problem together. They were working with their hands on something together. And they were producing a product. And that's more like life. And so when
That's what I'm talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about. The design, engineering, the industrial design, the manufacturing, the building of things, the thinking of problems with understanding of certain disciplines, like, economics or history or whatever, right? Science, right? But solving in the real world. Now, in MBA school, we do this in case study. And like you do a case study and you look at the problem and you look at it from all these different silos, the financial silo, the marketing silo, right? The management silo, right? And when you look at all these different disciplines, operational management and all this stuff, manufacturing and quality control and all these things, you learn a lot more. Like, for example, in MBA school, we were given problems like how to improve the wine industry in Australia. So you'd have to learn the history of wine. You'd have to learn the history of what's going on in Australia, the price points, the different marketing strategies, the supply chain and all this stuff, right? You learn a lot, right? Instead of just learning, one particular silo. So this case study concept that's coming out of MBA needs to go to a lower level at the undergrad and maybe even high school level, where these kids are more creative. Don't stop training students to take a test, because it's actually making these students not good in the real world. It's great to be able to filter them when they're all applying to the same school. But even the ones that score high on these tests don't do very well in terms of problem solving.
Out of one of these project-based learnings, you may have grades and you have scores, but you also have a portfolio of your accomplishments. And some schools have a thing called a portfolio defense, where they get the students in front of a team of teachers and they ask them, why'd you make this decision? Why'd you make that decision? And that's more like how the workplace works. So when you get that kind of school, then you're nurturing certain abilities like initiative, working on teams, having desire, being curious, being able to work hard through a difficult problem. And so you're cultivating that, and you can't quantify it, but you can create a biography of the person, and then that can be sent off to schools and they can find the right person. We have a greater diversity of educational institutions.
And this is where it's going back to the trade idea and the guild, where you're building a portfolio. So these students that are coming out of high school should be building a portfolio that is presented to the school. Stop these tests, man. These tests suck. I'm telling you. It's destroying our creativity in our society. And what it does is it creates an industry, the prep test industry, which is just for medicine, it's multi-millions of dollars. Tens of millions of dollars for prep testing.
Greater diversity of human abilities.
We also had a conversation with Raj Chetty from Opportunity Insights on the program too. And one of the things that's intriguing is when you listen to the statistics of what the proportion, how likely you are to get into college if your parents went to one of these elite colleges, it makes you just look at this and say, well, is this really that meritocratic a system if it's so tilted in favor of legacies or other external factors?
Yeah, I mean, it's an inherited meritocracy. So Daniel Markovits calculated all the in-kind contributions that educated parents make to their kids, like not only private school tuition possibly, but also like oboe practice, travel teams, et cetera, et cetera. And he assumed over the course of a childhood, such parents invest about $10 million in each kid. If you don't have the means, you just can't do that and you can't compete. And the gap opens up early. So by 8th grade, the children of the affluent are 4 grades ahead of the children of the less affluent. By high school, the children of the affluent have way higher SAT scores than the children of the less affluent. So it's a system you can game. And so one of the things Raj Chetty's work is so valuable at is reminding us to the importance, like we're totally school obsessed, we should be community obsessed. And Raj Chetty talks about how different communities create radically different levels of social mobility. And so some of the things, and that makes total sense to me, because an American child spends only 13% of his or her time between the ages of 0 and 18, only 13% in school. 87% of their time is spent somewhere else. And so the neighborhood really matters. And Chetty's research shows all sorts of unexpected things, at least to me. For example, cross-class friendships. If you have a friend, if you're in one social class, you have a friend from a different social class, that significantly increases your social mobility, because your friend may show you different forms of life that you don't see in your immediate experience. That friend may have ideas for you. Here's how you get into that school. Here's how you pursue that career. And so that super matters. Are there fathers in the neighborhood? It doesn't even have to be your own father. If you live in a neighborhood where there are fathers around, especially the guys, have a role model they can follow in life. And so these neighborhood effects are just super important. And somehow we need to think, not just as we think about who benefits from society, who has advantages in society. It's not just in the school, it's primarily in the neighborhood and the family. And those are the soft, what they call the soft skills, or the non-cognitive skills, which are the important skills.
There's another through line in your essay here that's interesting to me, and you seem to be advocating for a shift away from the me model towards an us model. You write, quote, "We want a society run by people who are smart, yes, but who are also wise, perceptive, curious, caring, resilient, and committed to the common good." And I wonder, in America in 2024, is that something that we can tilt toward? Because the cultural forces all seem aligned towards an idea of everyone for themselves. And it didn't just happen overnight.
Yeah, that's the culture of individualism we've had at the same time. So I would say going back to the post-World War II period, I happen to think that we've had 60 years of hyper-individualism in this country. And whether it was right-wing individualism, which is about economic individualism.
Individualism goes all the way back to the founding of this country. It's independence, self-determination. I mean, this thing goes all the way to 1776, David. Come on, wake up.
Or more progressive individualism, which is about lifestyle individualism. We've had a lot of individualism, and we've created more freedom for ourselves, which is great. But we've also weakened the ties between each other. And so my view right now, our political moment, right and left, we've decided we got a little too much individualism. We need more community. But now we're having a big fight over what kind of community we prefer. And so MAGA prefers a highly nationalistic, maybe patriarchal community. Progressives want a community built more on ethnic identity. Other people have different versions of community. But we're in the last 3 or 4 years, which have been so tumultuous, to me, are a period of cultural transformation. And we're chopping up that old
God, country, family. It's pretty simple. But, what do I know? David.
Of individualistic mindset, me, that system of narcissism. And we're in a very messy way trying to move our way toward a different kind of communal culture. And we're searching for what kind of community can we build.
You know what's amazing? There's so many people that are in mainstream media that are writing essays, part of the New York Times, they're on CNN. They come from very good schools. A lot of them come from Ivy League or Ivy League Plus. He's Ivy League Plus. All right? Why aren't they doers if they're so smart? Because what's happening is they're coming from these institutions. They're presentable. They're articulate, but they're not doers. And they just pontificate. You need to listen to people that have experience in doing things, not just talking. if you're talking, if you're listening to people that are only talkers and not doers, they don't have a part of the resume isn't doing, you don't want to listen to them because they're just talk, not doing. The people that actually have done something, built things, research things, those are the individuals you want to talk to. But most of these journalists, most of them, their whole career has been writing and talking with some evidence, but primarily it's an op-ed, an opinion piece. And they're considered wrongfully as part of the intelligentsia. So here's the big, big, big problem. We have too many individuals that are part of the intelligentsia that actually don't do stuff. And that's why America's pissed off.
Good to be with you, Harry, again.
All right. So that was David's take on how Ivy League admissions broke America. Now, the market right now, the S&P 500 is trading lower than yesterday at 5,877. The Euro USD is trading where the dollar is strengthening. It's at 1.051. Oil is trading at 69.29, and the VIX is trading at an elevated compared to yesterday at 18.25. So there's a little bit of risk in the market at the moment. Now, let's go to MSNBC and see what they have to say about Trump.
It's still dancing back there. Yeah, but you've been doing that for hours now. And anyways, I got you these boots on Google. Great deal.
But you're wearing them.
Yeah, I thought we could share.
Too many commercials. All right, before we go to MSNBC, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the 4 different versions of the structural nano silver soap that I have. I have charcoal tea tree in stock, oatmeal spice, peppermint, and lemongrass. So please go to my store, get these high quality soaps. They're made from structural nano silver. Get a couple bars for your household, help support my work, and help support your health. In addition, a lot of people can't sleep well. And if you're chronically sleep deprived, you can get early onset dementia, you'll have less energy, you're gonna have more toxins building up in your central nervous system and in your other tissues, and you're not gonna be consolidating memory. So you need proper sleep. When people are sleep deprived, you actually age faster and your immune system isn't working as well, and you typically have higher cortisol levels. So that's really bad, especially if it's chronic. You need proper sleep. So you slow down the aging process, you're consolidating memory, you're gonna have more energy, and you're detoxifying your body. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Good Night Formula. This has tryptophan and melatonin in it. This is a great way to have more energy when you wake up, to consolidate memory, to have more mental clarity, and to detoxify your body. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night Formula. Take it so you can get a well-rested sleep. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, Stephanie, let's see what she has to say. She's one of these people that didn't play real well over at Bloomberg, got kicked out, but as part of this intelligentsia elite.
politics. We're going to drill down on Donald Trump's search for a Treasury Secretary because whoever he picks will play a critical role in helping Trump deliver on his economic agenda. The New York Times points out this. Mr. Trump is seeking a Treasury Secretary who will carry out his unconventional plans.
Now, if they're so smart and they come from a prestigious institution for their education, and they're part of the intelligentsia, why do they spend so much time reading a teleprompter? You can do a show without talking from a teleprompter. Actually, it's more natural. It's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to talk on a teleprompter. But all of these people talk on a teleprompter.
In other words, big tax cuts, big tariffs, and no way to pay for it. That part is mine, while still having the credibility to keep markets buoyant. And that mix of qualities is not easy to find. Okay, talk about an understatement. For more, let's bring in Head Along, Washington Post opinions columnist, and David Gura, correspondent for Bloomberg and host of the Big Take podcast. He joins us from Rio, Brazil right now, where he's there for the G20. But David, let's start with these Treasury Secretary picks. Right now, the frontrunners appear to be hedge fund manager Scott Bessent, investor Mark Rowan, the guy's the CEO of Apollo, huge business guy, and former Fed board member Kevin Warsh, who's basically a Ben Bernanke deputy. These are hugely qualified guys, but with the exception of Bessent, who has kind of pledged the super Trump loyalty, it's unclear if these two guys are fully on board to execute Trump's plans. I mean, both of them in their professional current experience do not want to put us back into an inflationary environment, and that's exactly what Trump policies would do.
No, you've got it exactly right. So I look at
No,
those
she
three
doesn't get it
individuals.
exactly right because she's only looking at the tariff side. All right. She's thinking that this is only siloed. All right. Here's the problem with these pseudo intellectuals that think that they're part of the intelligentsia. If you're looking at the economic problem with only one variable, you're going to get it wrong every time. Tariffs are a means for negotiation. If the negotiations go bad for a fair trade agreement, not a free trade, but a fair trade agreement, if it goes bad, you put on the tariffs. The goods that are coming in are going to be more expensive, but you are going to have domestic producers being able to now compete with foreign products. Now, let's say there's no domestic production of that product. What it will do is it will force companies to move out of the country where the tariff is being implemented and have production put into a country or come back to America for making that product so there's not a high tariff. So what it does is it redesigns the whole supply chain. Now, in many cases, what's going to happen if that product is not being designed or manufactured in the United States, it's going to come back and provide more jobs. Now, it takes time to do that. All right. Is it short-term inflationary? It might be. But the other variables to take a look at is that some of these products may actually be inflationary, not all, but some may be inflationary. Others are going to go down. Taxation will go down. So you're going to have more money in your pocket. And then over time, you're going to have these economic clusters where you're going to have more businesses increasing the GDP of the society. You're going to have more economic clustering. And overall, your society is going to be better off. And that your debt to GDP ratio is going to be better. It's going to be less because your GDP is getting higher. So in the short term, some items may be more expensive. But when you look at all these other different levers that are happening in the economy, it's not so clear cut to say that it is at the aggregate level inflationary. Product A, made in China, right? You know, it has higher tariffs, comes into the United States at a higher price now. But a domestic producer may now be able to sell at a lower price. And let's say there's not a lower price domestic producer. There may be a company in Europe that's making that product that could be brought into the United States that's cheaper than from China. Why should we keep on building the military of China? For us to have cheap goods. Another problem with the intelligentsia, you know, is that they keep on pushing for open borders and illegal immigration. And they say that's going to bring down wages. Well, isn't that just slavery? Just in a different, in a modern sense?
Billionaires. I look at Kevin Warsh in particular. He's as establishment as they come. He went to Harvard. He's got an appointment at Stanford. He's a billionaire by marriage. I guess that's the defining quality of those three men. They're all billionaires, and that's a mark of success here for the president. But you're getting at something really key here is these are men who know the way Wall Street works, have a great familiarity with economics. They're folks who I would assume have listened to the conventional thinking when it comes to tariffs, the implications that these policies would have.
And first of all, the Treasury Secretary has nothing to do with the tariffs. The President of the United States can unilaterally just say the tariffs are happening. The Treasury Secretary may give some advice, but what the Treasury Secretary is more, focused on is bond issuance and currency, which is also collaborated with the Federal Reserve. There's a tight fit between the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. And if you're worried about inflation, Stephanie, the pseudo-intellectual, perhaps we should stop issuing so much debt, issuing so many bonds. Perhaps we need to truncate the inefficient spending that's going on in government. And when we do that, that would be deflationary, not inflationary. But, what do I know, Stephanie?
On the economy more broadly, and I think as you rightly point out, they find themselves in a very tricky position if they were to get this job, having to at once police this president who, with the exception of Scott Bessenter, are not loyalists to Trump. They're not very Trumpy as I see them, and all the while trying to...
No, I'll tell you, these people are freaking idiots. The establishment wants this. Cheap goods imported into the country so you keep on issuing bonds, create more debt. Trump's saying the opposite. All right? Stop importing cheap goods, build economic clustering so you have innovation internally, domestically, have more manufacturing, have more economic clustering, right-size government, reduce the wasteful spending, and stop issuing the debt.
Still confidence in the markets that both they know what they're doing as they proceed in this job, and the president does as well. So I think it would be a really tricky moment for them to be in. And I look at this other individual who's also in the running, Bill Hagerty, the senator from Tennessee. I don't see him as a likely candidate for this job, but I see the president-elect trying to find somebody who pleases both sides and how tricky that is for him going forward here.
Heather, our national debt is already $36 trillion. Inflation is a problem. It has been one of the biggest problems that President Biden has faced, and obviously VP Harris did in the election. How tough a job are any of these men walking into, given what policies Trump wants to put forward, and that inflation is already a problem?
It is, and I think what we're seeing here in the last 24 hours is one of the few things that still intimidates Trump is the markets. Why are we having this horse race for Treasury Secretary? Because he's a little nervous, right? He saw the big surge in the stock market after the election. He loved it. But last week it tapered off as people are starting to look again at his agenda and get worried that it is inflationary, that it is going to run up the debt. And you and I know that we especially saw a freak out in the bond market, which is really kind of curbing a little bit of what's going on here.
See,
So
they're
even if we
saying,
can get all
the pseudo-intellectuals are saying this. Trump's policies are going to increase the debt, and it's going to be inflationary. The inflation is going to come from tariffs. I already said that that could be short term, but in the long run, the United States is going to be more efficient and higher and have better economic clustering by having the tariffs. So you have the inflation problem short term with the tariffs, but then you have all this debt, right, from the government. Well, cut this overspending. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with stopping the overspending? Now they're going to say, well, the debt is going to increase because you're going to be cutting taxes. But the thing is by cutting taxes, more people are probably going to spend more, and some people are going to save, and some people are going to make businesses. So in the midterm, it's actually going to make the society more prosperous, not less prosperous. So what they're basically saying is, have your taxes increase and keep importing cheap goods and build up the military for China. That's their policy.
In Congress to roll over and endorse his agenda, the markets are pushing back a little bit.
And none of these three guys want to humiliate themselves, right? We're not talking, JV guys who are dying to have their name in the spotlight. Like, yes, they want this superpower, and I'm sure they're drawn into it, but they will be humiliated in their personal lives, in their professional lives, if they end up flat on their face.
I think you're right, but I would say one thing. Mark Rowan, keep an eye on him. He and his wife donated over $1 million to Trump's 2020 campaign. So he may not be your classic loyalist, but he's been there in the Trump fold for a long time, when some other Wall Street executives aren't.
Well, also given his position in Apollo, how much he could end up saving in taxes if he steps out of Apollo and into this job, it could be north of $1 billion, which that's a lot of money. All right, David, Howard Lutnick was in the running. Trump ended up picking him for Commerce Secretary. Elon Musk was kind of through this last minute Hail Mary pass for Lutnick. That's his boy. What do you think Musk could get out of Lutnick as Commerce Secretary?
Well, I think he's obviously established this quick relationship with him as he has with Donald Trump. He feels some familiarity there. And I think that he sees in Howard Lutnick kind of pliability here for the policies that he has in place. I think there's probably a little mutual admiration between these two individuals. But you look at Elon Musk and the role he's playing now, he is so closely intertwined with the government broadly, not just the Trump government to be, but the government now in terms of all of the companies that he's running that have contracts with the federal government. So anything that he can do to kind of put somebody into government who is in his good graces, who admires him or thinks he's doing the right thing is going to be advantageous for him. And I'm curious as I watch all this unfold, the degree to which that has staying power here. I mean, again, I just want to emphasize how quickly these friendships, so much as they are friendships, have come together here. It wasn't long ago that there was bad blood between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Now there is this romance, this familiarity. I think that there is some wise skepticism from a lot of people about how long that's likely to last as he exerts what's really some extraordinary influence here throughout this process, not just selecting the Treasury Secretary or the Commerce Secretary, but really being by the president-elect's side. He was there at a SpaceX launch today, kind of talking into his ear almost constantly, would be that in New York or Washington or Mar-a-Lago. It's a level of influence from a major businessman, the likes of which we haven't seen in a very long time, Steph.
Heather, a crypto CEO might end up with a position in this administration, and people who don't know crypto, who aren't invested in it, are suddenly watching it fly. Should there be a concern for people? I mean, this is a currently wildly unregulated space where there could be some wrongdoing in there, as a safe way to put it.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a friendly crypto administration, and we're already starting to see that line up in a number of different roles. Howard Lutnick at Commerce being the latest one, who's obviously been very supportive of Tether, among other crypto. I think, though, we have to realize that in cross America, the mood around crypto has shifted.
Totally.
You know, this is definitely something, particularly in communities of color, that's seen as a very valid investment, as a very valid alternative to the dollar. But you're right. What you worry about, what you and I worry about,
regulation.
yes, is you want to make sure that people don't put all their savings. You don't want to see somebody putting all their retirement money into this and really getting hurt. It is still a very highly volatile asset. I think people sometimes see it like gold, and it's not. It could lose all of its value overnight. And you just want to protect people from that. So you're right. I do worry about that going forward, that all the guardrails could come off here.
That's certainly dangerous. All right, David, let's talk about your trip to Brazil. You're obviously down there for the G20 summit with President Biden. What are other world leaders down there saying about the incoming Trump administration? I'm sure they're being very, very careful in all their word choices, because given how he rolls, you don't want to get on his bad side, at least not publicly. What are you hearing?
Yeah, they're being pretty circumspect about it. I think what's interesting is several of these G20 members have been through this before. So it's not like back in 2016 when Barack Obama was heading out of office and there was a lot of uncertainty about how Donald Trump would govern, what he would be like as a president. Many of these leaders know how he governs and what he's like. So that element of uncertainty is gone here. But we saw today this news overnight about what's happened in Ukraine, how that's been ratcheted up. And they're kind of looking at one another, trying to figure out what the path forward is going to be in that conflict, for geopolitics more broadly, for the global economy. And all the while, there's this huge variable. We've seen a very diminished Joe Biden here in Rio de Janeiro, not having a whole lot of meetings one-on-one with other leaders as he kind of tries to solidify his legacy and lay some foundation for policies to continue to the next president. But he is not the major player here. Everyone is looking north to Mar-a-Lago, to South Florida, to the president-elect, and just not knowing exactly what he's going to do, if the bluster that we've heard on the campaign trail and the transition thus far is going to translate into actual policy, and what's likely to happen on January 20th. So I think you have a lot of leaders who are at once confused, uncertain about what's going to happen policy-wise when Donald Trump comes into office, and also just trying to make overtures toward him as much as they can. Javier Milei of Argentina, for instance, going to Mar-a-Lago to pay his respects to the president-elect. I think we're going to see a lot more of that as leaders try to find whatever inroads they can here to Donald Trump and try to get into his good graces as he becomes president once again, Steph.
Stephanie, I never really liked her, even when she was at Bloomberg. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. I have it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and also in extra virgin olive oil. This is a very strong antioxidant. How it works is it's a buckyball. It's a molecule that has 60 carbons, and it soaks up free radicals. Very potent. Take a teaspoon a day. Take it every day. Take it on an empty stomach for better absorption. If you work out, take it before your workout. You'll notice that your recovery time is quicker. In addition, you do this every day, you're going to have this compound effect. You're going to start seeing your tissues performing better, your endocrine system performing better, your immune system performing better. You're going to be slowing down the aging process. You're going to have more energy because it's boosting up your ATP. It's improving the health of the mitochondria. And when you have all this, when you're soaking up these free radicals and you're having more ATP, your systems, your body systems will just perform better. The tissues will perform better. In addition, your neurons will perform better because you're soaking up the free radicals that are building up in the neurons, but also you're helping the mitochondria. You need a lot of mitochondria in your neurons to create the ATP to produce these neurotransmitters. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, soak up those free radicals, slow down the aging process, have more vitality, and improve the different systems in your body. So please go and get the C60. I have it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. Take a teaspoon a day. This is also great to give to your pets, right? Your cat or your dog. And with that, just use half or a full dropper. All right, depending on the size of your pet. So please go to my store, soak up free radicals. This works for humans and for pets. All right, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, now we're gonna go to CNN, and they're gonna be talking about Matt Gaetz and all his problems.
Gaetz, the former congressman, is going to the Senate to try to lobby senators on his own behalf. Donald Trump wants him to be the next attorney general. Some senators don't seem to like the idea so much, including reservations amongst some Republicans. CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton is here now. Harry, what do the betting markets think about the chances for Matt Gaetz?
There is just one word when it comes to Matt Gaetz' chances in the betting markets, and it is yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. Chance Matt Gaetz becomes Trump's AG. Look at this. 37% say yes. The majority, 63%, say no. And I should note, I looked up every other one of Trump's choices to be in his cabinet. This is the only one in which less than a majority say yes. The bottom line is the conventional wisdom suggests that Matt Gaetz' chance to be Trump's attorney general are in big, big trouble.
One thing I know from social media the last few weeks is the betting markets apparently know everything. They know more than political scientists, than political consultants. The betting markets are always right, according to social media.
The betting markets aren't always right, though. I should point out they did nail that Trump was going to win the election a few weeks ago. And when you have stuff like this, in which you don't necessarily have polling, I think they're a good gauge of the conventional wisdom. And at this point, the gauge of conventional wisdom is that Gaetz' nomination is in big trouble.
So Matt Gaetz has many issues, one of which Chuck Rocha, who's a Democratic strategist, I was on with him the other night, he said one of Matt Gaetz' biggest problems is that senators think he's an a-hole. That was his words there. Why do they think that?
Yeah, look, Matt Gaetz just loves to make enemies on Capitol Hill. I mean, Matt Gaetz' voting record among GOP House members this Congress, #1 for most anti-establishment. Remember, he helped lead the effort to overthrow Kevin McCarthy as the House Speaker. He has called the Senate, I think, like the swampiest thing in the world or something like that. He's gone after individual senators. It turns out that it's not always good to make enemies on Capitol Hill when you need their votes to be confirmed. Yeah. And he has, in fact, gone out of his way to insult folks. So it's not a real big surprise that there are a lot of senators who might be saying, why the heck should we help this guy out?
It is worth noting that this may be seen as one of his main qualifications
from Trump's perspective.
By some people. It is worth noting.
Yes.
Okay. This nomination in general seems to have riled people up quite a bit.
Yeah, look, the politics of getting confirmed are mostly about what's going on Capitol Hill, but it's also about public pressure. And if nothing else, Matt Gaetz has certainly ginned up a lot of public interest in his nomination. So this is Google searches for Trump's cabinet picks over the last 7 days. Gaetz has been the most searched by far. He has gotten up 1,300% from the median Trump pick. So he's generating a lot of public pressure. That public pressure may be felt by those who are potentially voting to confirm Matt Gaetz in the United States Senate. I should note, while the public perception of him could be positive or negative based upon all those folks who are searching for him, the initial polling data suggests that he is the least popular of Trump's picks. In fact, the only one that's underwater in terms of net favorability ratings. So at this particular point, Mr. Berman, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with somebody who's not exactly popular on Capitol Hill to begin with, and then you might be dealing with a lot of public pressure from those outside of Capitol Hill saying, wait a minute, we don't want this guy to necessarily be the AJ.
So there's that. All right, Harriet, and thank you very much for all of that. Kate?
Ladies and gentlemen, joining us right now, senior political commentator and Democratic strategist, Maria Cardona.
Yeah, more, we're going to have more pseudo-intellectuals telling you how to vote, right? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic. I have it in powder form. You mix it with food or with water. I mix it with hummus for my lunch. Or you can take the veggie cap version, which is also very high quality. So either way, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotic, take it every day. It's important to be able to absorb nutrients, to be able to reduce gut inflammation, to be able to improve metabolism, improve that communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. A lot of people don't realize poor gut health can affect your brain function and depression. In addition, poor gut health can cause skin problems. So having a good gut biome improves your overall health, not just your gut health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the powdered probiotic or the veggie cap version. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video. Let's listen to some more pseudo-intellectuals.
For the Republican National Committee, Madison Desiato. It's like, it's as if I haven't said your name 1 million times over the course of our work together, Maria. Apologies. It's, you know, it's the morning. Madison, let's jump in on this. Jumping off of all of the numbers that Harry and John just went through with regard to Matt Gaetz, here's the addition that I wanted to ask you about in terms of, are his chances getting better or worse as the days progress? Is the attorney representing the two women who testified before House Ethics and say they were underage when having sex with Gaetz when that started? The attorney told CNN last night a little bit more about what they gave to and told the committee.
They provided photos to the House at the New York event. They provided selfies that Representative Gaetz sent them. They testified that they sent Representative Gaetz nudes from time to time at his request, and also on their own accord.
Yeah.
There are also numerous text messages, group messages between them as well. But you have to understand that my clients are only 2 out of the over a dozen witnesses that testified. I was present for 2 of those. And so what I'm telling you is just a fraction of the evidence that's available.
Madison, do you see there is a point that this nomination becomes more of a problem than it is worth for the president-elect, even though he's continuing to publicly back him?
Yeah, I'd be shocked to meet anybody today that thinks the chances are getting better for Gaetz's, going through the Senate and getting approved. Originally, I think a lot of the talk was about Collins and Murkowski, maybe a third person. I mean, now you go down the list, think of, almost a quarter of the senators that I think would be likely to go against this nomination if it were to even get to a vote. McConnell, Young, Cassidy, obviously not MAGA senators, very institutionalist. You have Curtis, who is the new senator, and Romney seat, who was heavily criticized by Gaetz. I would say would be likely to go against it. Ernst has made some comments as well. A couple other senators not running for re-election, very big question marks on what they would do. And then obviously this is before we even have any of this information. While it may not come out right now, I think it is going to come out. It's just a matter of when and how in regards to the House Ethics Committee report. They will be meeting today, of course, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats on that committee that will make a decision whether they will release it either publicly or to the Senate. Again, the Senate can't compel the release, but information is going to be released. And so I think this is not only an uphill battle, it seems that it's not looking likely at all at this point.
Yeah, and we're hearing more and more Republican senators saying, we'd like to see that report when they've got it, which is when you say it publicly, it is a message. Here's the other thing, Maria. John King is continuing his All Over the Map series. And this time he went back to Iowa, talking to voters who initially said they would not vote for Donald Trump, but then did, and now are glad that they did. One of those voters is Betsy Sarcone. She says that she decided to vote for Donald Trump on the economy and wanting change. Listen to what she says now about Trump's nominees.
The Kristi Noem, the Matt Gaetz, I'm not necessarily excited about it. Worried, I wouldn't say I'm worried. I voted for change, as did the majority of the people, and that's what we're gonna get. So I don't think worrying about it every day is gonna do me any good.
An interesting perspective from one of these voters. This is what voters voted for. What do you say?
Well, let's go back to, I think, the original question that we all had going into the election, which was what was going to be the top issue. And it turns out that the top issue and what voters voted for change was on the economy. And what we're getting from all of these nominees is anything but. Yes, that voter is right. They are going to get change. But is it going to be the change that voters wanted and that voters asked for?
This is the point I'm making about the silo thinking. You think the economy runs it runs in a bubble? It runs in a vacuum? It's related on how we spend for defense. It's related on our tariff policy. It's related on social programs. It's related on the overspending and the lack of efficiency in the government. It's related to many different variables. It's not just the economy. The reality of the situation is we got a lot of dry rot that's going on in the House of America. And the pseudo-intellectuals don't want to see people tear down certain walls of that rotted house to rebuild it. They go, oh my God, you're tearing down a wall. Oh my God. Not realizing you're putting a new wall up that's actually going to make the house better. So you can't look at this in silo thinking. Corruption at the agencies, overspending at the agencies, the inefficiency of government at large needs to be corrected. So what's happening is that the powerful elite that benefit from the status quo are kicking and screaming because they don't want to have reform. They don't want improved efficiency. They don't want reorganization and restructuring of these agencies. So they're going to demonize many, if not all, of the nominees for Trump's cabinet. America needs to wake up. We can't think in silos. This is a multifactorial problem with many different variables. It's nonlinear. It's not a linear problem. It's nonlinear. And that we need to restructure government. And when you do that, in the long run, the economy will benefit. And this is the problem with pseudo-intellectuals. They think in one variables, they think linear, they think in silo, and they are aligned with the status quo. Status quo is what's fucking America.
My sense is, given from the nominees that have up until now been the ones that Donald Trump has picked, it's not the kind of change that voters have asked for. I feel badly for this woman who I think is trying to make the best of what she is seeing is now coming across TV screens and the news, which is, as we just discussed, Matt Gaetz with all of these icky, disgusting allegations against him. And then several others on down the line, you know, RFK Jr., Linda McMahon, Dr. Oz, you know, all of these folks who have very little experience and indicate a wholly unserious approach to the most important policy questions and issues that this administration is going to deal with. I think that voters are very concerned about what, in fact, it was that they voted for versus what it is that they're going to get.
So what is ClickUp? ClickUp is an all-in-one productivity software where you can manage everything and anything related to your work. Your documents, your chats, your whiteboards, your projects. The value of this, you don't have to buy 5 softwares to do this. You don't have to be hopping back and forth between multiple tabs, trying to find that email from a year ago. Instead, you can find everything in a matter of seconds, keeping your work. And
so that's CNN. You know, right there, they were trying to demonize RFK Jr. because they want the status quo. The status quo is bad food, more processed food, and more fast food, making the children in America obese and having lots of disease later in life. That's the status quo. But RFK Jr. wants to stop that. What about the inadequate testing for certain types of pharmaceuticals and not having proper controls in the testing? RFK Jr. wants to stop that. What about the revolving door at the FDA and the CDC officials going to corporate America and getting their golden parachute? RFK Jr. wants to stop that. Not qualified? He's definitely qualified because he, for most of his legal career, has been trying to hold people accountable that's poisoning people. He is qualified, far more qualified than health officials that we currently have. See, what it is, the mainstream media is aligned with the status quo. Trump was put into office because most of America is tired of the status quo. Restructure government. The agencies have become too powerful, and it's gotten to the point where they're trying to circumvent the actual president. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. It's time to restructure. It's time to tear down the building and rebuild. And they don't like to see all of the mess during the tear up. All right, let's go to Fox here. Before we do that, before I do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support my work. Where else are you going to get unfettered pontifications about pseudo-intellectuals on mainstream media? My channel gives you great perspectives on things, but you need to help support my work, and I want you to help support your health. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support me and your health by getting the great products that I have, like the olive leaf extract. This helps with cardiovascular health and helps with your immune system. How? It brings down inflammation, and it also improves your lipid profile. Please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. Boost up your immune system. It's the cold season. Take vitamin C every day. This has also magnesium in it. If you're not feeling well during the cold season, take a double dose. Make sure you drink it with filtered water. And improve your cardiovascular health by taking omega-3 every day. It brings down LDL levels and increases your HDL levels. Really important. And this is synergistic with olive leaf extract. So this is a great combo. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Extend the deadline into early 2025 and Trump's second term. Republican Ohio Congressman Max Miller coming out against the plan. He's urging Congress to pass a full-year deal so Trump can quickly move his agenda forward and not be slowed down by a fight over funding. House Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris wants to attach the SAVE Act to the government funding bill. The SAVE Act, of course, requires voters to provide proof of citizenship when voting in federal elections. Joining me now is Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles. He's a member of the House Financial Services Committee and the House Freedom Caucus. Great to see you, Congressman. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Do you support putting the SAVE Act with a funding bill?
Oh, absolutely. Now the question is what will the Senate do with it? And as we go forward into January, look, the first 100 days of the Trump administration are going to be incredibly important. So I do think we need a spending plan, a number that reflects Trump's priorities. So we get into those first 100 days, we're debating policy, not fiscal numbers.
Well, what are you going to do to get to a point where you're not going from bridge to bridge with these continuing resolutions? Will this ever change?
Well, we've got to get back into the appropriations process. And so I think Mike Johnson, the House in general, are committed to that process. The question is how do we get past December 20th? How do we start the new year so that we hit the ground running? And again, so we don't get bogged down into some of the policy and financial fights that you've seen over the last 2 years. We've got to move forward. And look, Donald Trump wants to move swiftly. He has a big plan. He has a big agenda. And part of that, the first step, the building block of it, is making sure that we get into this first fiscal year with a plan to move forward financially.
Well, President-elect Trump is building out his administration. He's tapped Trump transition team co-chair and Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick as the Commerce Secretary. He'll be partly responsible for overseeing trade and tariffs. Give us your thoughts on this pick and about Trump's agenda. Will it have an immediate impact on the economy in terms of extending those tax cuts and instituting tariffs in place?
Well, for those of you that don't know much about Mr. Howard Lutnick, he's someone who's faced adversity in his life. He was an innovator in the trading space. After 9/11, much of his firm was lost in that tragedy, and of course, because of the innovation under his leadership, they were able to move forward. He's been committed to the families that lost so much during 9/11, and so what you have is someone who's a fighter. He's an innovator, and he has a vision for business and the country that I think aligns with President Trump. And so as you're looking for that person who's going to, fight for American business, who's going to promote our country and be an innovator in the commerce space, that's Howard Lutnick. I think it's a great pick. I had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with him when he was in Nashville a few months ago, and I was really impressed.
Well, do you think that Trump is going to get these nominations confirmed?
Well, I think that the President of the United States has made it clear he needs to move swiftly as we go into this new era under Donald Trump, and he should use every mechanism that he has available to him to get his nominations passed. You look at the Justice Department that has been weaponized against the American people. You have Matt Gaetz that's been nominated, and look, President Trump is committed to Gaetz and getting him through that process, whatever that may look like.
So we're using every tool, meaning recess appointments.
If that's what it requires, yes.
I think Mitch McConnell said he was against.
You know what's in your cheap protein powder? Well, here to tell us is all-natural fitness athlete Paul Scar.
All right, let's see what we got. Sucralose, artificial flavors.
Ours, yes.
I think Mitch McConnell said he was against that.
Well, I think what you've seen over the last few days is that President Trump has been making calls to the U.S. Senate. Matt Gaetz and other nominees have been calling the senators, making their case to them to get through the nomination process. And so, again, I think there's a lot of work to be done between now and Christmas as we go into the new year. And I'm confident that President Trump will get his nominations through.
Well, President Trump is also inheriting a Middle East on fire, potentially the start of World War III. I mean, Russia is accusing Ukraine of launching U.S.-supplied long-range missiles into Russian territory after President Biden gave Zelensky the green light to use them. You posted this on X. On his way out the door after both Putin and Zelensky stated they were ready for peace under President Trump, Biden is engaging in a proxy war with Russia through Ukraine. Tell us more, Congressman. Are you saying that the Biden administration is creating havoc as they're walking out the door?
Well, it would seem that way. And look, President Trump has made it clear that he's not there to start wars, or he's not coming into the administration to start wars. He's there to end wars. And so there's the opportunity to look, the world is on fire, whether it's in Africa, Haiti, Israel, of course, Ukraine and Russia. The bullies of the world know that Biden is weak, and they've used this as an opportunity to flex their muscle and advance their own goals at the expense of the people around them. President Trump wants to put an end to this. And look, a secure world, a peaceful world is great for everyone, whether it be commerce, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, or anywhere in between. And we've got to put an end to these endless wars and get back to the idea, let's let free markets prevail, let's move forward. And I think what Biden is doing is escalating a situation that we finally have a peace and opportunity for peace and a window for peace, and he's doing everything he can to undermine it.
Yeah, I mean, Mahek, jump in here because it is somewhat baffling that we get a message from Russia, the foreign minister there saying they want to reset with the United States. We got that just 2 weeks ago, and then a week later, Biden gives the go ahead to Ukraine to use these long range missiles inside Russia.
Well, I have to say, this is very intentional from the Biden administration. He has less than a month before President Trump takes the White House. So what he's going to do is create turmoil, division, and chaos. And as we're looking at World War III, I have to go back and ask the congressman, what are we going to do during these recess appointments? Because at the end of the day, we have to have it. Republicans and Democrats have always done recess appointments.
All right. Normally, if there's going to be some sort of geopolitical problem, you're going to start seeing oil trade higher. Oil doesn't want to break $70 a barrel. It keeps on bouncing off of 70 and going back down. So it's trading now at 69.17. So the oil market seems to me that there's not going to be high probability of some sort of problem in Ukraine, all right, with Russia. But I am concerned that just the perception that the Biden administration is giving Zelensky capability to reach further into Russia proper, causing negotiation issues when Trump gets into the office and tries to de-escalate the issue between Russia and Ukraine. Now, I don't remember where I heard it. It was last night, but I don't remember who said it. It might have been even on Times Radio. Because Times Radio actually is informative at times. But the tactical nukes, the potential for tactical nukes, with Russia have a certain range, all right? And they would have to move those tactical nukes closer to the border between Russia and Ukraine to be able to hit certain regions if they were going to do that. And that these longer range missiles were potentially to prevent Russia from doing that. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe this is Biden's Defense Department trying to position themselves to prevent tactical nuke launches. Maybe it's true or maybe it's not. I don't know. But I'm concerned that as Trump gets into office and he tries to de-escalate the situation, that between now and January 20th or whatever it is, we may have further escalation. But I'm not seeing that in the VIX price or in the oil price. So, and equities are now, even though it's off session lows, it's moving up a little bit. It's still below yesterday's close, but seems to potentially get back to the close of yesterday by the end of trading session. But I just don't see the stress in the oil market or in the VIX to suggest that this is really going to be a problem in Ukraine. But the perception is that it seems like the Biden administration is trying to circumvent the Trump administration from, having a easy transition in trying to de-escalate the problem between Russia and Ukraine. So who knows? It's going to be an interesting 4 years, that's for sure.
In the past, when we've had these types of issues, are members in your party, the Republican Party, willing to call on the Senate and help the president and help these nominees get their appointments during recess? Because again, Bill Clinton, Obama, President Reagan, you name these presidents on both sides. So we need to let the American people know this has happened regardless of who's been in office. But I haven't seen Republican members raise their hand and say, I'm going to call the Senate and help. Are you willing to do that?
Well, I can't speak for the other members, but I, for one, am willing to help. I have been helping because, again, we're entering into a new era. And at a time when President Biden is escalating a conflict in Europe that could really spiral out of control. And again, with the backdrop of Russia saying, hey, let's do a reset here. And so we've got to move swiftly. We don't have time to have these petty arguments in the U.S. Senate when we've got to confirm these nominees and we've got to move forward. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to instill peace through strength. That's what President Trump did in his first term. That's what we're going to have to do in his second term. And we've got to support our allies out there that are advocating for freedom, like Israel, like Taiwan, again, who want to put commerce over conflict. And when you have individuals like Putin who is, look, they've had enough, like they've had for years of war, they're done with it, let's move forward.
Cottrell, we're just getting Target earnings out, and it looks like it's weaker than expected. We'll send it over to Cheryl in a second. But who do you want to see? Let's get to Cheryl right now because the stock is trading down almost 7%. $1.85, Cheryl, versus an estimate of $2.30 a share.
It's a rough quarter for Target, Maria. Absolutely. So adjusted earnings per share coming in at $1.85. That was a big miss. We were looking for $2.30. That's a big hit for Target. Also, if you look at revenue, $25.67 billion, that was also weaker than expected. So that's the headlines. But look, the comp sales, it fell 1.9%. The company had told us that the range was 0 to 2%. Comp sales down 1.9%.
So if Target is going to have problems, then this may be signs of maybe the holiday season being lackluster.
Now, digital comp sales jumped 10.8%. You could say that that was a positive, but the store traffic is the biggest issue here. And this is not the same report that we got, Maria, from Walmart yesterday that you covered, because it's a very different story. And also on the call, are they going to be cutting prices like they were expected? But again, not getting the numbers in, big miss for Target. CEO Brian Cornell obviously is going to have a lot to frankly answer to on the call. Maria, back to you.
All right, thanks very much, Cheryl. Again, this is a big miss, as Cheryl just told us, on Target earnings here and revenue. Earnings coming in at $1.85 a share versus an estimate of $2.30 a share. Revenue coming in at $25.6 billion. Versus an estimate of $25.89 billion. Comp store sales were down. They were expected to be up. They were down 1.9%. They were expected to be up 1.4%. Digital comp sales were expected to be up 5.2%. In fact, that was better than expected with the move, as you just heard. Real quick, this stock is at the lows of the morning, down 12%. Adam, your reaction?
Well, people aren't going into the store, and they're not going there because Target effectively broke it lost the faith of the American people. If you remember, the LGBTQ merchandise really offended young mothers.
Wow.
And that's, I think, the issue. It's still not
and they've been unable to get it back, down 12.75%. Congressman Andy Ogle's last word from you, an economy that is weakening as President Trump tries to figure out who his Treasury Secretary is going to be. You're on the Financial Services Committee. Who do you want to see Treasury Secretary?
President Trump has an embarrassment of riches for their treasury pick. My senator from back home is someone who may be considered for that. Senator Haggerty, that's right. And so, but again, there's a lot of great choices. And again, what you've seen is that President Trump has a vision for what he wants his administration to look like. And he's looking for those individuals who can implement and execute that vision. Because look, it's going to be a short 4 years, and we've got to get it done.
Of course. All right. Thanks very much, Congressman. Good to see you.
The reason why they needed to ram this through quickly is because the midterm elections are going to be difficult for the Republican Party if they don't perform. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support my work and your health by taking the multivitamin. This is an easy to digest multivitamin. You should be taking a multivitamin every day. Multivitamins are enzymatic cofactors. So if you're not taking the proper multivitamins, you're not going to get the cellular processes performing as well. So it's important to take a multivitamin. Add it to your stack. Really important. This is easy to digest, high quality vitamin. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I also have a great new product on my store, which is vitamin K2 and K7. This helps with cardiovascular health, and it also helps with bone health. And it stacks well, all right, with D3. Both of them working together helps to absorb calcium, all right? So D3 also is a gene expression cofactor. Very important to have proper cellular processes. And it also helps cells to go into apoptosis when they need to go into apoptosis. That was very important during the 2020 season and very important during the cold season. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin K2 and K7 and the D3. They stack really well together. They both help with bone health and also cardiovascular health. All right, let's what's going on over at Bloomberg? This is
Jerry. But it's taken our attention off of this Matt Gaetz situation. And I wonder your thought as J.D. Vance walks him personally around Senate offices to try to gain support here on the same day the ethics committee is meeting, Wendy.
That's right. It's really shows you how important it is to get his picks confirmed and in the job without too much hassle. Senators love, it's a real club. They love commiserating with their own. And so to have Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, who was a senator from Ohio, personally guiding Matt Gaetz to the offices and saying, this is our guy, is supposed to help. It certainly did help with Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who is an on again, off again, or I should say off again, then on permanently Trump supporter, who has said that Matt Gaetz denies these allegations against him about sex and drug use, and he's behind him, and the president should be given latitude to pick his own team. So, but there are just as many senators who have expressed discomfort ranging to horror at the thought of Matt Gaetz being, the Attorney General of the United States.
Including some senators like Mark Wayne Mullen, a Trump ally, who says Matt Gaetz showed him videos of these young women on the floor of the chamber.
That's this rumor that sometimes becomes public on Capitol Hill, is that Matt Gaetz would sit around in the cloakroom with his phone showing people, pretty risque videos of parties he's been to, and he really liked to portray himself as a party boy. And so, the idea, however, that he wants to squelch the House Ethics Committee report when he is seeking to become the top law enforcement officer in the United States is what's sticking in a number of senators' craws.
Well, yeah, and it's taking attention off of the rest, like Pete Hegseth, although he's apparently getting the introductions from J.D. Vance as well.
Right.
These meetings must be really something
really
at this stage of the game. But then there's the man who is helping to drive the transition, and some would suggest pulled a little bit of a Dick Cheney.
He did.
In finding no one other than
Cheney is
himself.
not the first guy to pull a Dick Cheney, by the way.
Enough, but it's of course Howard Lutnick, who will be the Commerce Secretary, even though I guess he preferred to be the Treasury Secretary, knowing that he was featured prominently on the campaign trail before he was running the transition as a supporter for Donald Trump. Let's go back.
At the turn of the century, our economy was rocking. We had no income tax, and all we had was tariffs. We took down our protection. We took down our tariffs, and we turned instead and we taxed. Americans were letting the rest of the world eat our lunch.
There was a little depression that followed that period of time.
And to be sure, he's referring to the turn of the 20th century, not the 21st century.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah,
there was a real affinity for late 1800s at Mar-a-Lago. This will likely be Secretary Lutnick, though, correct? What does it mean for the Commerce Department and for the U.S. Trade Rep, which I guess will now fall under Commerce? This is a reorg of some sort?
We're still trying to sort that out back in the newsroom. I mean, what's going on is that Trump announced yesterday that Howard Lutnick would be Commerce Secretary, and he gave the Department of Education to Linda McMahon. These two were his transition co-chairs. It's a little bit of a snub if you want Treasury Secretary. Commerce is kind of the stepsister agency to that. However, it seems that Trump was sort of sweetening the deal a bit by putting the U.S. Trade Rep under the Commerce Department, which is often, I mean, it's not a cabinet position, but it does report directly to the White House. And some presidents have elevated it to a cabinet level job, which means you get to go to the cabinet meeting. It sounds like what Trump might be thinking, although, I hate going there, is trying to figure out what Trump is actually thinking, is that he will put the USTR under Howard Lutnick and make Howard Lutnick the tariffs guy. He's clearly enthusiastic about it from that point.
Right, and that kind of takes the Treasury Secretary outside of the tariff fold and be a little more market friendly. That's not all we talk about in interviews. Gina Raimondo kind of reinvented the modern Commerce Secretary as a key player in an administration, forwarding legislation, being very present in media in a way that we really hadn't seen with Commerce Secretaries before. A sought-after interview. Will he be like that?
Well, if he is, which he seems to want to be by his personality, as we've seen him in interviews where he talked about health policy at one point and crypto policy at another, he will. The trouble is, in the Trump administration, you can often get your leash yanked if you do that too much, because Trump likes to be the guy who's front and center. Trump has been uncharacteristically quiet during this whole thing, putting out paper statements when he named someone, went to the launch yesterday but didn't hold the press avail. He's been very quiet, but I think if he really will start to chafe at surrogates talking too much. But I do think, Lutnick is enthusiastic about tariffs, so we'll carry it out.
I want to get into education with you for a moment. Linda McMahon, people think World Wrestling, Small Business Association, or what that
administration,
was her job in the first Trump administration. She was actually a co-chair of the transition, right? She was part of this with London.
Yeah.
Well, she's going to run the Department of Education, which has a lot of people scratching their heads, not an educator by trade. And her task will be essentially dismantling the Department of Education. And I wonder how that will work with, I mean, it will require approval of Congress, right? If there's low-hanging fruit for her to start making changes.
There is probably some fine print somewhere in the rules that allows executive action because remember, I mean, these departments are parts of the executive branch. They are funded by Congress. And so I suppose if they decide by executive order, I don't know if that's possible, to eliminate the education department, that funding would then be rerouted elsewhere. I will say she is also an active proponent of school choice.
Yes.
And she, if they do maintain the Department of Education, get ready for lots of vouchers, get ready for the embrace of religious schools and private schools with other aims that might not be right for, not be right for everyone.
Also cultural change.
Cultural change.
Stopping schools from, quote, promoting inaccurate and unpatriotic concepts.
That sounds like big government to me.
About American history surrounding institutionalized racism. This gets back to critical race theory. We have less than a minute left. That will be her first charge.
That if it's not to dismantle the agency, that will be her first charge. And that's just the sort of federal mandates that Republicans have always complained about, right? From the Department of Education. They shouldn't be telling local schools what to do. But if they are going to tell schools in, say, California that you can't teach this about, picture book about being the child of gay parents or something like that, that sounds like a federal mandate to me.
Fascinating, as always. And fascinating to spend time with Wendy Benjaminson. Thank you, as always, helping us drive our political coverage here in Washington. I'm Joe Matthew. This is Balance of Power. Glad you're with us on the Wednesday edition. An important conversation coming up next as we look at K Street in the era of Trump. This is Blue.
K Street is going to be in an uproar because there's going to be restructuring of the government. Matt Gaetz most likely isn't going to be confirmed. There's too many things popping up that embarrass the Trump administration. What's shocking is that Trump must have known this. So was Matt Gaetz put in to just kind of be a smokescreen for other people? It's kind of a pawn. Who knows? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. We're in the cold season. It's really important to take lozenges and drops. I have some great drops that are on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Blueberry. I have it also in cherry and in honey and lemon. There's 100 in each of these. Get a couple bags for your household. So the moment you have that irritation, because of, you're at work and you catch something, or you're at school, or you're on the train, or, with friends, or you're in your household, take the drops right away, neutralize the pathogen or the irritant, and maintain the mucosal barrier so you're mitigating the problem. All right. Taking these right away, it has the structural nanosilver, will help to mitigate your exposure to the cold season. All right. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get a couple bags for your household. Really important. These are high quality, has the structural nanosilver, and neutralize the irritant and maintain that mucosal barrier. Get it in the honey and lemon, the cherry, or the blueberry. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's go to live now.
To announce this pick, he says Howard has been a dynamic force on Wall Street for more than 30 years, saying he joined Cantor Fitzgerald in 1983 and rapidly rose through the ranks to become president and CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald at the age of 29. Remember, Lutnick also chairs the Trump Transition Council right now. So I want to bring into the conversation former Wall Street analyst there, Anthony Esposito, to talk about this pick and more on how it might offer some insight into some of these economic policies that will be promoted at the Department of Commerce. And Anthony joins me. Anthony, good to see you here. Thanks for being with us. So I guess for viewers to start off, who is Howard Lutnick?
Howard Lutnick is he's the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. He's been a main staple on Wall Street for years. He started, I think, in the early 80s, rose to the top at Cantor, and has really guided what's a namesake firm on the street, on the sell side on the street for 40 years. Make no mistake about it, Wall Street is a pool of sharks. It's a great place to be, and you can make a lot of money and you can make some really good friends, but it's an aggressive environment. I started out in 1996 on the floor of the stock exchange and still involved. For Howard Lutnick to guide Cantor over the last 40 years, and in particular through the early 2000s and the 9/11 event, which devastated the firm, he's a true leader. He has a backbone, he has a gut, and he swam with the sharks and survived, and not only survived, but excelled and grown this business. So I think he really is the exact person that President Trump would want on the cabinet. I think he'll do extremely well. I think he's a proven leader in a very challenging environment, in a very challenging business. And I'm looking forward to seeing him leave Wall Street and help this administration.
So what about qualifications, Anthony? Of course, he was the main figure there on Wall Street. Does that necessarily confer on someone bureaucratic experience? This is a sprawling department there at Commerce.
It certainly is. And for him to look at, I think the things that make him unique and qualified for the position are the business that he runs at Cantor is 5,000 plus employees, but some of the most aggressive sell-side traders on the street, which is saying something. I don't think Washington, D.C. has anything to challenge Mr. Lutnick with as he leaves downtown Manhattan and heads to D.C. If you talk about trade and tariffs, which he'll oversee, if you talk about him liaisoning as the liaison between the federal government and the private sector to work on jobs growth and economic growth, I think that he will be a perfect fit, having navigated the waters that he's navigated and managed the size of the firm that he's managed. I think he's a good fit. I think he'll do extremely well.
I want to put up this tweet here from our colleague Aisha Hasni there from Fox. Quoting a source familiar telling Paul Steinhauser of Fox Digital that it's a free-for-all for Treasury Secretary right now, and that it's a mad dash to find someone pro-tariff. The source also adding Howard Lutnick was offered an ambassadorship but rejected that offer. Where does Howard Lutnick fall on the issue and the question of tariffs? Is he for them or against them? Or does that not even matter? In a Trump administration, do you need to be all in for them?
Well, look, I think Howard Lutnick would say himself that the members of the team that President Trump is assembling are there to give input, are there because they're leaders in their field, and are there because they're experts. At the end of the day, the decision will be the decision of President Trump. I don't think Mr. Lutnick would disagree with that. So where he stands on tariffs, I'm not particularly sure what his stance is, but I believe that he has stated in the past that if you look back at what tariffs did in the first Trump administration, the fear-mongering of them spiking inflation has not been realized. And the fact of the matter is we went through a quote-unquote trade war with China when Trump took office in 2016 and 17, and we came out on top. So I think that if you look at history and not at the scare tactics and the headlines, if you look back at history and you look at the fact that tariffs used the way Trump wants to use them to level the playing field and to bring jobs and manufacturing back to the United States, they would actually bend.
This is the reason why I keep on saying when you're looking at the tariff policy of Trump, it's multifactorial. It's multivariable. It's not siloed. There's many levers being pulled. And in the short term, it might be in some products be inflationary. But overall, it's going to strengthen the economy. Right? And it's going to be even better when you play with tax reduction and make the government more efficient with its spending and trim $2 trillion if Elon Musk can do that. See, it's multifactorial, but the globalists, they're going to demonize Trump until the cows come home. because the globalists, they're threatened by this.
Our economy benefit our citizens, and I think that Mr. Lutnick would be in favor of that, and I know President Trump is. And the bottom line is, most of the times, if you use the tariffs in a way where it is the idea of the tariff to get to a more level playing field, you typically will get to that level playing field without the tariffs even being enacted. And that's a benefit for us.
But Anthony, there has been some cognitive dissonance about whether or not tariffs will increase costs for consumers. And so, I don't know if it's fear mongering or escalation or scare tactics here on the part of those at Walmart, including the CEO. Reuters reporting Walmart on the tariff increase under Trump says, quote, "We're concerned significantly increased tariffs could lead to increased costs for our customers here." It just seems like...
Here's the problem with Walmart. Walmart destroyed middle America small businesses in small towns and shipped the manufacturing, forced their suppliers to make stuff in China to give the public a cheaper price. And what it did was it built up China and destroyed the middle class, the middle class business owners. It made Walmart family one of the richest families on the planet. And of course they're going to be whining. Well, we're going to have to increase our prices at Walmart. Why not have your products at Walmart made by Americans? Economic clustering is where it's at. Globalization needs to die, and localization needs to be resurrected. Very simple.
Was in the Trump orbit, Trump himself, are foreclosing the byproduct of tariffs that in fact happens. It does happen, doesn't it? I mean, I've been grappling with this with folks like yourself on the air here, because it was long held conservative orthodoxy for the last 30, 40, 50 years that tariffs do just that. Why is it all now changed here? The tariffs don't do this, or do they still? But what are we hearing?
I think the first part of the conversation
It will for certain products. But again, tariffs are a means for negotiation. If the negotiations go bad, well, they get the tariffs. And if the prices are too expensive and people really want those products, there'll be manufacturers that will make them in an area where there is not a tariff. And hopefully those manufacturers are in the United States, because we'll have the economic clustering. When the debt keeps on going up because we have inefficient government and we're giving money to Ukraine and our GDP isn't as robust, we have a high debt to GDP ratio. But we have more economic clustering, we stop the wasteful spending, we'll have a better debt to GDP ratio, and we'll have a more robust economy. It's really simple. Stop shipping the American jobs.
Our tariffs implemented, and are they absorbed by the consumer, creating inflationary pressures, or are tariffs used to get to a fair place? So if we look at trade with China, if we're not treated fairly with China, if we're not treated fairly as far as pricing and as far as import exports, the tariffs may never go into place. So the tariffs are used as a tool. It's kind of like speak softly and carry a big stick. We have a big stick. We are the largest economy in the world, and China needs us as much as we may need China. So to get to a level playing field, I think the first assumption for tariffs is what will actually be put in place versus what is going to be the starting point of the negotiation. And I think that is the administration's view. And I think that if we look back at the previous 4 years of the Trump administration, that's kind of where we ended up. Keep in mind, the tariffs that were in place under Trump 1.0 are still in place with China. They were not, the inflationary pressures that we're seeing, let's really dig into it, is because we're running a massive deficit. We have massive debt, and we have a Fed that's mismanaged interest rates and Fed funds rates. So
exactly, too much government spending. Stop building up China. Stop buying your shit at Walmart. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support my work, because where else are you going to get this great pontific education? Get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex helps cellular metabolism, helps to boost up energy levels by providing nutrients to mitochondria. The first few B vitamins help the electron transport chain, which is in the mitochondria, so it'll boost up your ATP. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. It also helps with neural health. As you get older, you're going to need to protect those neurons, and you're going to need vitamin B complex. Get the turmeric. Turmeric is an antioxidant, but also brings down inflammation. Really important for your immune system and also your cardiovascular system. And ashwagandha root controls blood glucose levels, also controls your cortisol levels. It brings down inflammation. It's synergistic with turmeric. Should be taking them together. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the turmeric and the ashwagandha, help with your cardiovascular health and your immune system.
Tariffs put in place by Trump 1.0 in 2016 are not our problem with inflation right now. If we're going to have an inflation conversation, let's really look at why we're struggling with the inflation that we have. Let's look at the fact that we may be reigniting that inflation as the Fed is cutting rates, what some could say prematurely, versus talking about a tariffs program that we didn't see a spike in inflation due to tariffs the first time. So let's just wait and see. Let's give President Trump the mandate that we've given him, and let's see how he handles it this time. I'm sure it's going to be as good or better than the last time.
Okay, but there is this kind of in the atmosphere sense, especially coming from Trump and other senior Republicans, that what you just saw there from the Walmart CEO, that that isn't going to happen. That's not going to be a byproduct of tariffs slapped on whatever goods. I mean, should the argument be made that both? Would you like to hear that from key Republican lawmakers here? Would you want them to disabuse people of the notion that prices may go up, but there are other positives to tariff policy here?
Look, I think the conversation needs to be had, and the possible outcomes need to be examined, right? Like anything else, I do that every day for my business. What we can't look at is we can't look at tariffs in a vacuum and say that if President Trump enacts tariffs, prices are going to go up. That's just not the way this works. President Trump can enact tariffs, and a supplier like China could decide to eat those prices in order to still do business and export out to the United States. So let's have the conversation. And yes, I would love to see Democrat and Republicans step up and talk about the possible outcomes versus the only negative outcome that everyone is barking about. The bottom line is President Trump has been put back in office because of his performance the first time and because of the lackluster performance this time by President Biden and Kamala Harris. I think we can have these conversations, but to have them in a vacuum is kind of what everyone seems to do, and it doesn't make total sense to me.
Anthony, too, though, still no Treasury Secretary. There's some names being reported and bandied about. I have some of them in front of me. I mean, Howard Lutnick was also being considered for Secretary of the Treasury. Right now, the front runner seems to be Scott Bessent. He's the CEO of Key Square Capital Management. Other names that have been reported, Kevin Warsh, he's a former Federal Reserve Board member. Even Robert Lighthizer, who Trump has already tapped to be the U.S. Trade Representative. Yet again here, why do you think they're still grappling with who to pick for Treasury Secretary? Does it go right back to the tariff question, or are there more factors?
No, I think it goes right back to the inflation question, right? We keep focusing on the Fed as the leader who's going to kind of guide this massive plane down to the soft landing. And I don't think that the Fed has as much to do with this as people think. Look at to start, they've cut 75 basis points since September, and we're seeing the 10-year yield spike up because the Treasury market's saying, we don't believe you. Inflation is actually going up. We're seeing the 30-year fixed mortgage rate up a full % as the Fed cut 50 bips. So let's circle back. It's not because of tariffs, it's because the Treasury is actually responsible for a bulk of the inflation that we're seeing. And that's because the current administration, top-down, policy down, is print spend to produce fake growth within this economy. That's the problem. This is a very important position. And I think that's why President Trump is taking the time to really look through, not that he hasn't taken the time for all the positions, but the Treasury Secretary is massively important right now. I think Janet Yellen has done a disservice to the American people, as has this administration, by putting us so far into debt and creating such a deficit to try and meager through some GDP numbers and not say that we're technically in a recession, which is exactly what has gone on. We have literally paid for growth over this administration's tenure. And I think it's time that the Treasury Secretary step in and act a little more responsibly than Janet Yellen has. And I think that's why we're waiting so long to get to this final decision, which is a good thing.
Yeah, Fox Business's Edward Lawrence has some reporting that the Trump transition team is trying to avoid issues and embarrassments seen under the Biden administration, like where Treasury Secretary Yellen kept saying for years that inflation was transitory. As she said it, inflation kept rising. In an exclusive interview, Yellen said she regretted saying that. So some circumspection there from Yellen. Do you have any top picks? Who would you like to see there?
You know, I think Percent is a good choice. He's obviously a Wall Streeter, so maybe that's where my my bias comes from. He could be. I think he's a very intelligent man. He's had a long successful career. I think he's well in tune with the markets, and he's well in tune with government policy and top-down policy. So that would be my gut call. I think it's a great group. I think it's kind of a win-win. And not to be disrespectful, but it's a win-win when we look at the current Treasury Secretary, because she has not performed up to par on any level. So I think we could.
So whoever is the next Treasury Secretary, what is their number one priority? What do they need to do first?
Stop spending.
So I think the first thing that they need to do is stop manipulating the Treasury curve. I think that we need to stop issuing debt. And I think that we need to stop manipulating the Treasury curve, short end to long end. I think that would be the first and foremost what we need to get done. We cannot continue to print money in this country and issue and create debt to fake growth or to fund spending that may or may not even be spent in the United States or for our citizens' benefit. So that would be it. We need to tighten the reins there. And then we need to start to see some real economic growth and start to overcome this inflationary bout that we're battling and start to see some real economic growth within the country and get people back to work and get real wages up.
All right,
Totally agree. And it starts with building America. Economic clustering. I don't really care about the Walmart family and the hundreds of billions of dollars that they have. Walmart hurt America because it destroyed small businesses and forced manufacturing into China. They were part of the globalization that fucked up America. You know what? Maybe Walmart needs to fall. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Stop buying your shit at Walmart and go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the ubiquinol. This is a very high bioavailable CoQ10. Very high quality. I've been taking ubiquinol for many, many years. The reason why you take it is to boost up energy levels. It's an antioxidant, so it's helping with your mitochondria, and it also helps the health of your neurons. Very important when you get older. You should be taking ubiquinol every day if you're age 40 plus. All right? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get this very high ubiquinol, and it is synergistic with C60. In addition, and it's also synergistic with NAD+. NAD+ helps to boost up energy levels. It also helps to repair DNA damage, and it's a neuroprotector. It helps the health of your neurons. It's synergistic with C60 and ubiquinol. And lastly, lignans. This is a powder. You mix it with your food or with water, filtered water, and this will help to boost up your immune system. It's an antioxidant. It brings down inflammation, and it also helps with hormonal health for males and females. Important. People don't realize that because of the food you eat, because of because of the water you drink. Most people are not drinking filtered water. Most people are eating processed foods, and that affects your immune system and that affects your endocrine system. And that's the reason why we need RFK Jr. in as HHS director. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the lignans, take it every day, boost up your immune system, and help with your endocrine system. I'm not wrong. I take this every day. All right? I take these supplements every day. Follow my protocol, and you're going to improve your health and slow down the aging process. Go to the store and get the lignans. And stop going to Walmart. And fucking up America.
If many Americans went to the polls with inflation on their minds, they need to know Judice Bloomberg rating.
Earnings news, Target missing the mark with the stock plunging 21%. The retailer trimmed its full year earnings outlook. Also,
the thing is, here's the crazy thing about it is that they're demonizing Trump supporters and Trump's administration because they're going to be an America First policy. And they're going to try to scare you with there's going to be inflation. Well, don't you think the Walmart family, with all its power, is trying to manufacture consensus against Trump? Because the Walmart family is going to lose if small businesses decide to sell products that Walmart sells. Bringing back manufacturing to the United States is a good thing. I don't really care about the Walmart family.
Will feel the tremors of NVIDIA's quarterly report. This is a big deal around here because it's a big deal on the market. Many argue NVIDIA is the market. And so we want to get into some of the action here that we might prepare for, because options are telling us we could see some pretty big moves in either direction, whether it's good or bad news. And Bloomberg Markets correspondent Abigail Doolittle is with us from New York. A little bit lower ahead of this. We're a little nervous before this report. Abigail, what do you see?
It seems that investors are just a little bit anxious ahead of this big report. And the reason that they're anxious, a number of reasons. You were mentioning those options positioning for this chip maker, suggesting that there will be an 8% move up or down. That would equate to $300 billion up or a gain, or a $300 billion loss. Given the fact that it's the biggest point contributor to both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, it is going to be a market-moving event in the after hours, then overnight in the futures market, and then certainly tomorrow. Now, relative to the quarter, folks are expecting 74 cents in adjusted earnings on just about $3.3 billion in revenues. It's a little bit shy of that, actually. The big question is, will it be enough? Because this stock, another reason that this is so important is the stock is up about 200% on the year. The AI craze driving the chip maker higher. The growth is good. It's above 80% year over year for both the top and the bottom line, but that's compared to 122% on the top line a year ago and 165%, so, or sequentially, I should say. So the growth is actually decelerating. At some point, analysts, investors are going to wake up to this, and you're going to have a, the music has stopped moment. We don't know if that's this report, but you're right. The building here may just shake at 420 today.
Well, it's NVIDIA. So I've got to ask you about what's happening in retail here. We had earnings from Target. Charlie mentioned this. Speaking of the building shake, my God, it's down over 20%. But it's not just Target. You look at Walmart, blew the doors off with its report. It's near an all-time high. It looks like it's just barely positive right now, Abigail. And Williams-Sonoma is up more than Target is down. So is this a company-specific issue or are consumers pulling back? How do we read it?
It's hard to tell right now because there's so many mixed signals around the consumer in terms of stores and products that they're moving toward and stores and products that they are moving away from. Relative to Target, a massive miss, apparently price cutting not luring customers in. That Target feeling that people joke about, but when they are really on point with product, they do really pretty well. So there's some concern here around the holiday quarter, but you would say that Target is more the staples. There's some discretionary in there, But Williams-Sonoma, to your point, up 30%, the best day since 2008. They did beat earnings by 11%, sales by 1%, so good beats. But this is a high-end kitchen store. So the fact that people are shunning Target but going to a high-end kitchen store, it's a little bit baffling. TJ Maxx put up a good quarter. Walmart earlier this week, a good quarter. High-income shoppers going there for value. We're looking for more and more signals, but it is interesting to note that Dollar General and Dollar Tree, those bargain stores, they're both down more than 4% in sympathy with Target. So it seems to be some, the companies that have not been doing well this year. It's not even a division between the needs to have and the nice to have, because of course Williams-Sonoma is a nice to have, the need to have at Target and Dollar General and Dollar Tree. So there may be, to your point, some company-specific issues at those stores, but we still need to see more signals on the overall health of the consumer.
All right, Abigail, great to compare notes, as always, with her eyes on some specific issues we're following today. We'll have results, of course, after the bell from NVIDIA, as you would expect, right here on Bloomberg, and we'll be talking with our own Michael Shepard.
My gut feeling with the Target issue is you have the wokeism product line that so you have that backlash from that. But I also think that it's possible that people are cutting their spending and cooking more at home, and they maybe are upgrading some of their utensils and kitchen appliances and kitchenware to do more home cooking type stuff. That might be the reason. But it is, or maybe it's the holiday shopping tied to that. But I have this gut feeling that more people are cooking at home now and not going out to eat.
Imagine that. Thank you, California. That will help to give us the final numbers here. But the fact is, if Democrats flip both California seats, Republicans will have just a 5-seat majority, 220 to 215. You say, well, Joe, that's more than one. But remember, Donald Trump is raiding the cookie jar for what? At least 3 cabinet members. A couple of people calling sick. We don't have a majority. And that's where we start with our political panel. Jeannie Shanzano is with us, Bloomberg Politics contributor, Democratic analyst, and political science professor at Iona University, and a veteran of the House of Representatives. Maura Gillespie, founder, principal, BlueStack Strategies, Republican strategist, veteran of John Boehner's Speaker's office. It's great to see you both here. And Maura, for that reason, I'll start with you. Is Mike Johnson's job actually going to be more difficult in the new Congress?
Maybe.
It certainly will be, given the numbers we're seeing, and just the fact that it looks like Trump world is picking people from his, Republican conference. And so you see some members, we're watching kind of play out right now with the steering committee and bolstering up support there to make sure they have a strong leadership team around them and making sure that there isn't any defections going forward. But because there's going to need to be bipartisan work being done, that's the only way to get things done and moving forward in such a thin majority for Congress and for the House especially. And so I think Mike Johnson made a joke about it maybe last week or so, saying enough, please stop taking my members to the Trump administration. And I think it was probably both in jest, but also in sincerity, because this is a problem for him. Again, some of these seats that we're waiting to hear about, while a lot of them are strongly Republican, the red districts, it still is concerning to have those gaps.
Maybe, Jeannie, you can go out to California, help them count the rest of the ballots here, because I do believe it's been more than 2 weeks now. We told people it could be as long as 2 weeks, and we actually still don't have them all yet. But I'm curious about lessons learned here, Jeannie, and what we might go through in the new Congress. Hakeem Jeffries is sitting back watching all of this. He's probably kind of smirking right now, thinking about Mike Johnson with a majority potentially of 1 seat. And he's been working in that environment for some time, ever since he actually took over from Nancy Pelosi. So what will be the role of the Democrats in that world, knowing that Mike Johnson will need them for most everything? And I'll be more specific by asking you about the Speaker's election. Will Democrats help to reelect Mike Johnson in a world where he's got 1 or 2 seats to spare?
I don't know.
That is an open question. I think the Democrats are going to do what they did last time around. I think responsibly they should try to keep us moving forward, but you can't promise that's going to happen. Johnson has the toughest job in Washington, D.C. If you compare it to 2017 when Trump came in, he had 241 Republicans. Now, to your point, he is facing potentially just one seat, and that is incredible. It means that any member on his side can take exception to what Mike Johnson wants to do and make his life really, really difficult. So we talked about the fact they changed the rules on ousting the speaker. That doesn't get codified until the new House comes in January, and there is every ability for a renegade Republican, just one, to hold that up and to make his life difficult. And that's just for him to become speaker. Once he does that, he's supposed to change the tax code. He's supposed to adjust the debt ceiling. He's supposed to fund the government. I mean, this is going to be an uphill battle for Mike Johnson. And there's more expectations because the Republicans own Washington, D.C. now. So he has the worst job there, I have to say.
Wow, that's saying something in this town. Maura, will Democrats help to elect Mike Johnson as Speaker again?
I doubt it. I think that the Republicans seem largely solid behind Mike Johnson, at least going into the Speaker's vote. I think that some of those outlier members hopefully have, I wouldn't say learned their lesson, but they've realized that with Trump being president, they don't really benefit by lashing out against Mike Johnson because they're supposed to be presenting a unified front. They're supposed to be on the same team, and they're supposed to be doing the work. And by holding things up and being an antagonist just for the sake of being an antagonist doesn't really bode well. Maybe it gives them a little bit of fame they want, but that's not helpful in the long term, especially if they're looking to please Donald Trump. So I don't think that Democrats will need to save Mike Johnson, but I do think once he becomes Speaker, the relationship between Speaker Johnson and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is going to be even more important.
Curious development coming out of the House now, considering the election of the first trans representative in the House of Representatives, openly trans, Jeannie. This is Representative Sarah McBride, who's just coming to Washington for orientation. Speaker Johnson now officially announcing that he will ban transgender women from using the women's restrooms and locker facilities in the United States House of Representatives. He told GOP members he was going to do this, and here we are. It's now official, and we see a statement from the Speaker's office. Is this sensible policy, Jeannie, or just bullying?
This is coming from Nancy Mace in particular, who introduced this ban, which many people believe was targeted, to your point, at Sarah McBride from Delaware. And this is something that Nancy Mace has come out just in the last several hours saying that she has been the target of death threats as a result. So it has gotten incredibly contentious, and the politics of transgender rights that we saw come front and center during the campaign has now made its way onto Capitol Hill. And you know, the reality is Sarah McBride was duly elected by her state and by her district, and she has every right to use the restroom of her choice. And this does seem to be bullying on the part of Nancy Mace and the Republicans. It is no way to conduct the business of the House of Representatives to start off the new Congress, the 119th, with a focus and aim at one member that you want to isolate.
What do you make of this, Maura? There are a lot of people who talked about the trans issue during the campaign and think there's a mandate to do something like this. But this is the people's house. Should the Speaker be targeting an individual in this way?
Well, one thing I'll say about the House, and especially this is only on the House side, the Senate side doesn't have the same rules, so that won't apply on the Senate side. What's interesting, though, is that for the longest time, up until recently, there wasn't even a women's bathroom available for members on the floor where votes were happening. They had to go downstairs in the Capitol building, down to the visitors' bathroom, and use that one, which is, again, I worked in the Capitol building. That's what we had to do to go downstairs, and we, you know, for members to have to do that. So it's taken...
Unless there was a gender reassignment, that person's karyotype should be going to their karyotype bathroom. Meaning, if they were born a male, they should be going as a male. If they were born as a female, they should be going into the female bathroom, period. Done. None of this trans stuff.
To talk about progress, it's taken a long time to even just get the Lenny Boggs room, so women have a room to go to up on the second floor, which is, for those unfamiliar, it's in the rotunda, the Capitol building, just off the House floor. But so saying that, we have a ways to go about progress. I think that there's a conversation that needs to be had. We haven't sorted out how to best deal with, talk about women and transgender in sports and things of that nature. So a lot still needs to be discussed, and we're not there yet to have that kind of a solution.
I don't know what it is that we're not ready yet to change thousands of years of social order. No. The reality of the situation is they're trying to push a woke agenda, and most of America, a big part of America, said no to wokeism. It's unbelievable.
Gonna use the men's room. Is that where we're at? We'll keep our eyes on this for you, and we'll welcome our global television audience for hour 2 of Balance of Power. Do stay with us. Congressman Mike Lawler from New York will join, and you want to be there for this conversation right here only on Bloomberg.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great structural nanosilver gels that I have. I have 2 types. I have one in a tube form, and I also have one in a dispenser form. This is great for traveling or carrying it in your bag. This is a dual purpose product. You can use it as a skincare where you can put it on your skin daily and exfoliate, and you'll notice that your skin is clearer and tighter, especially around your face. A great way to do it is to put it on your skin right before you go to bed and then exfoliate when you wake up. Another thing that you can use these structural nanosilver gels is to help heal a wound or an abrasion or a minor burn. Another way to use this product is to neutralize pathogens. Put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils, and it'll stay active for more than 5 hours. That way, you're maintaining your mucosal barrier and you're neutralizing pathogens. This is really important to use on a daily basis, especially during the cold season. So please stock up, make sure that you have these items in your medicine cabinet ready to use, and use it as a daily skin routine. But go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the structural nanosilver gel, either in the tube form or in the dispenser form. Click the link in the description of this video and go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, what's going on in the news? What's going on in the news here? FBI director, right? Let's go to Morning Joe, see what he had to say. I don't like Morning Joe.
Okay, this beautiful fight court. This is amazing for stews and gravy. It's absolutely stunning. Again, this was very similar dishes and obviously with a big handle. And this baby here, come on.
Meanwhile, Trump also just nominated Fox News contributor Sean Duffy to serve as Secretary of Transportation. Yeah. If you're Irish Catholic like me, you know at least 20 guys named Sean Duffy. Sean Duffy sounds like every character in a Ben Affleck movie.
He hired the guy from Road Rules to be Secretary of Transportation.
I can't stand these people.
The road is right in there. That's one of his least embarrassing picks. Maybe he'll pick one of the teen moms to be Secretary of Labor.
Late-night comedians poking fun at Donald Trump's recent administration picks. In a moment, we're going to break down.
Let's get this straight. They went to Mar-a-Lago to make amends and be a little bit more centrist, but they opened up their show with demonizing Trump with late-night comedians. They're all about just trying to protect their show from getting canceled. I tell you, these two are like the epitome of evil.
For key administration roles in Medicare, education, and commerce. And we'll discuss what top Senate Republicans are now saying about Matt Gaetz's Attorney General nomination as the House Ethics Committee is set to meet just hours from now. And why Republican Senator Chuck Grassley says more transparency is needed to move things much faster. Plus, Senate Democrats are making a last-minute push to confirm dozens of President Biden's judicial nominees before Republicans take control. We'll tell you what Trump is now demanding senators in his own party do, and they did the same thing.
And we have breaking news here that we want to report to everybody around the globe that's watching. How many people watch us on Armed Forces Radio?
Tens of millions.
I think they did
It's hard to measure with, DVR and
exactly, and all
and
YouTube,
YouTube.
Snapchat, or whatever it's called.
Morning.
So here's the breaking news. Here's the breaking news. It says here, Willie, that John Heilman, for the first time
Yeah,
since Chubby Checker was at #1 with a twist,
Alman's here.
got to Morning Joe on time at 6
Oh
a.m.
my God.
What are you doing?
This is
Come on.
I want to say this is consistent with my past record, which is that usually if I'm here on time, it means I've been up on
Well, Alman, we were talking about this. And this is
one of your favorite, establishments on the other side of the river, Sure.
when you walk in late.
I'm not late. Am I late?
Yes, but
Are you gonna scold me for being late when I'm here?
I'm taking an opportunity during a positive
It's a
moment.
teachable moment.
Reinforce how important it is that you do what you did today, unlike stumbling in 20 minutes late.
What if I stumble in 20 minutes early? Like really stumble.
Fine.
Well, isn't that right, Ed?
Apparently, I'll research it.
Like I said yesterday, I know useless trivia. That's actually true. So Captain and Tennille sang at the big bicentennial gala, and they sang Muskrat Love, which was one of their hits. And afterwards, the Queen let it know that she thought it was crude, that they actually were singing about animals, loving each other.
All right.
Isn't that a weird booking for the bicentennial?
This is all
It was
like the Beatles.
No, it was 76.
I can't take these guys. I just can't take it anymore. I can't even watch that show for more than
Coverage
5 minutes.
as that story breaks after the close of trading on Bloomberg Television and Radio. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, and Balance of Power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons.
The best part
All right,
about
Kelly in
the
New York, thank you so much. I'm Kaylee Lyons alongside Joe Matthew here in Washington, where we really all have many questions today, but one of them particular looming large over Capitol Hill, and that is the question of whether or not we will see in full, by sanctioned release, the Ethics Committee report into Matt Gaetz. Because remember, if the committee does not vote to actually release this formally, we could still hypothetically see it leak.
Well, that's a good point. There's a big difference between the two. There are different ways to get this information, including, by the way, the lawyer of the women involved in this case, those who brought allegations against Matt Gaetz.
We don't like what's going on, so we're gonna leak the information. Sounds like a deep state thing, doesn't it?
The Ethics Committee is gathering right now, and our reporter at the location lets us know that Chairman Michael Guest has arrived. He had little to say as he did arrive, and the top Democrat, Susan Wild, is there as well. So this is happening as we speak, and we're joined now by a member of Congress, Raja Krishnamoorthi, the Democrat from Illinois, is with us. Of course, ranking member, the Democratic leader on the China Select Committee. Congressman, welcome. It's great to have you back here on Bloomberg TV and radio. I wonder your thoughts on this, if you have any updates for us on whether this report will be released or whether you think it should be released.
I don't know what they're going to decide. I think it should be released. I think that there's precedent for this. We know of situations where there were severe scandals, and this is one of them where, we're basically having someone being nominated to be the top law enforcement official in the country to enforce the laws, who's implicated in breaking so many of them. And I don't need to go through the sordid list, but this is someone who should not have been nominated, let alone confirmed.
Well, and as we consider the information that senators will have access to as they decide whether or not to confirm Mr. Gates, Bloomberg is reporting today, citing sources familiar, that the Trump transition team still has not signed an agreement with the Justice Department and therefore the FBI that would allow the Bureau to vet nominees. You, of course, also sit on the Intelligence Committee, Congressman, and I just wonder your thoughts on what it would mean if we don't get full background checks for, frankly, any of these people who could be getting some of the most powerful seats in the American political universe.
I think that's all you need to know with regard to some of these nominees. The fact that they're not willing to have a background check of these folks tells you that there are some serious flaws with them. Not to
if you actually read Pompeo's book, America First, and Kushner's memoir when he was in the White House, both of them talk about how you had White House officials slow walking the approval process because of Russian collusion type stuff. So you have deep staters slow walking confirmation and approval. And this was the lesson learned from it. It was basically, fuck that, we're just going to just move it forward. See, what it is you got an administrative state that is going to do everything in their power to slow walk the policies of Trump. And if they do something wrong, fine, get rid of them. But just give Trump the chance to get stuff done to fix this economy and fix this country. But they won't tell you what happened during the first
Congress. And will you help re-elect Mike Johnson as Speaker?
Well, I think that, let me answer the first part, which is, I think the Democratic minority is going to be essential in getting the business of the chamber done. As you know, on spending bill after spending bill in terms of making sure the government functions, Mike Johnson and Kevin McCarthy, for that matter, relied on Democrats to supply the votes to get the bills passed. I'm not going to be supporting Mike Johnson. I'm going to be supporting Hakeem Jeffries to be Speaker, and I think we'll be unified in that particular vote.
Well, when we consider the idea that come the next Congress, whenever the new Speaker is elected, there could be 3 vacancies that need to be filled by special elections, and that could provide a bit of leverage for Democrats, Congressman. How easy will it be for the minority to hold up the first 100 days agenda working with this kind of margin?
Well, there are any number of issues that require a majority vote. And as you know, some of my colleagues on the other side will not in any case, for instance, vote on spending bills, vote for them, I should say. I call them part of the vote no, hope yes caucus, where they are hoping that there are enough Republicans and, for that matter, the majority of Democrats supporting that measure to make it go through passage so that they don't have to support it and they can rail against it and rhetorically oppose it. So I think Democrats will absolutely be necessary for a lot of routine business that the incoming president as well as Speaker Johnson need to get done in Congress.
We're hearing about red lines, Congressman, from President Xi. This is something that we talked to you about, of course, because of your perch on the China Select Committee. And President Xi met with Joe Biden at the APEC summit at the end of last week and reiterated his 4 red lines for when Washington turns over to a new Congress and, of course, a new administration with Donald Trump in the White House in January. Should he be concerned about what is coming? What will the Trump second administration mean for our relationship with China beyond this idea of across-the-board tariffs? Will there be a relationship between these two at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think there will be some continuity with regard to the policies of the Biden administration going into the second Trump administration, just the same way there was from the first Trump administration into the Biden administration. So, for instance, I'm hopeful that they'll keep the export controls in place with regard to high-end semiconductor exports. I'm hopeful that they'll keep the outbound investment restrictions in place. And finally, among other things, we have to do everything we can to repair our military industrial base and also equip Taiwan and our friends and partners and allies with what they need to deter aggression by the Chinese Communist Party.
What about TikTok, Congressman? Because apparently the president-elect wouldn't like to see it banned. After all, what's its fate in the United States given the legislation that has already passed and become law?
You're exactly right. It is the law. It's in the courts. I fully expect that it will be upheld by the courts. And if the incoming president wants to repeal that legislation, he should come back to Congress. Now, you should know that 360 people voted in favor of this legislation in the House, not to mention a huge majority in the Senate. And so I think that there's a lot of sentiment in favor of making sure that we protect our national security.
You know, Donald Trump has indicated that Mark Zuckerberg might be a greater threat to the American people than anything posed by TikTok. He says you get rid of TikTok and you empower Mark Zuckerberg. How would you react to that?
I don't think, I personally think that with regard to anybody in the United States, if the president wants to do something about social media, for instance, which a lot of us believe need to be regulated better, then we need to pursue legislation here in the House and the Senate and get it signed into law by the president, and we can do that. But with regard to a foreign adversary controlling a social media app, they are beyond our laws. They are beyond our rules and regulations. And that's why this particular law, which requires divestment by ByteDance of TikTok, makes sense, and that's why it commanded so much support.
Congressman, we were all a bit puzzled yesterday when the announcement dropped from the president-elect nominating Howard Lutnick to be Commerce Secretary. Also included in that announcement, saying that he is now going to have direct oversight of the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, which typically reports directly to the president. And I wonder, as we consider the relationship with China, specifically knowing the battle that is likely to come over tariffs, what you make of that move and this kind of operational structure?
I'm not sure. All I can say is that the substance of the policies that they're talking about across the board tariffs of 20% on all goods from everywhere in the world would be severely disruptive, be super inflationary for my constituents. It would hurt my exporters in Illinois, including our farmers in Illinois. And then it would, basically divide us from our friends, partners, and allies whom we need in countering aggression from China.
All right, Congressman, we always appreciate you joining us live from Capitol Hill and in your district as well when you are there. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, a Democrat from Illinois, live on Bloomberg TV and radio. Thank you so much. Of course, we all aren't really sure what this new structure is going to look like with Lutnick helming commerce and the relationship with the USTR, but we don't know who the U.S. Trade Representative will be either. That is one piece of this economic puzzle that has yet to reveal itself.
Yeah, we talked to Rob Waters about that a little bit earlier. He used to consult both the Commerce Department and the USTR, not sure exactly how they agree and what that will mean for the strength of the U.S. Trade Representative going forward. A lot of questions here, including who will be Treasury Secretary. We still don't know.
Still the big question remains unanswered. But Bloomberg's Saleha Mosin, senior Washington correspondent and host of the Big Take DC podcast, has been chasing that question relentlessly for the last several weeks. She's joining us now in our Washington, DC studio. So Saleha, we know Lutnick is not going to be Treasury Secretary. He will be Commerce instead, assuming he is confirmed. And so that whittles down the short list even more. And there's going to be some pretty important interviews happening in Florida today. Just walk us through what that means for the process and if it actually signals coming closer to an end.
Right, Lutnick being nominated to Commerce, it narrowed the list that expanded just before that was announced. So today we know, we've reported that President-elect Donald Trump will be speaking to Mark Rowan of Apollo, and he'll be speaking to Kevin Warsh, the former Federal Reserve Chair. He has already interviewed and had many discussions with Scott Bessent, a hedge fund manager, about the Treasury post and the NEC job. We've been reporting for a while that whoever Trump selects is most likely going to have someone with Wall Street pedigree, like all the men that he's been considering. And anyone being considered for Treasury Secretary could also slot into the very powerful role of National Economic Council Director at the White House.
Some have suggested that might have actually more emphasis in the Trump administration because you're actually in the White House with him, talking to him potentially on a daily basis. But I'm wondering about the idea of Senator Bill Hagerty. We're watching this SpaceX launch last night. Kaylee said, look who's standing behind Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Is he going to end up being the dark horse candidate for Treasury?
I think now it's no more dark horses. We know all their names. Haggerty's name has been in the mix for a
Maybe a
couple.
sleeper is a better.
Sleeper, I like that, Joe. That's perfect. Sleeper candidate. His name has been in the mix for a couple of candidate secretary positions.
Yeah.
We heard about his name a lot for Secretary of State, and then it popped up for Treasury. I will just say he's definitely been in the mix. He does not quite have the sheer wealth that tends to impress Donald Trump. Rowan, Scott Bessent, Warsh, they all are very, very wealthy men. And that speaks volumes to someone like Donald Trump.
Well, we do know that he values that. He also places high value on looking the part, but there are policy objectives he would like to achieve here. With Kevin Warsh specifically, I have a lot of questions about how much they really align. I've seen many people in the crypto community saying that he actually wouldn't be good for crypto because he's supports CBDCs, for example. There's been some pushback in that regard. Then there's people who are pro-tariff who say he might not like everything Donald Trump would like to pursue in that arena. How much really do they align, or how much could they diverge, and could that be a deal breaker?
I think, Kaylee, what you're honing in on is the reason we're seeing this protracted battle over this job, because there's dueling forces over what Donald Trump wants and needs in this role. He wants a markets-minded person, but most markets-minded people are not super pro-tariff. Now, what we've seen play out with this battle is that it is showing how serious Donald Trump is about using tariffs as a tool of trade policy, maybe foreign policy and national security. So because of that, we've heard more comments from Scott Bessent about how aggressively the U.S. can and should pursue using tariffs as a tool for some of these policies. Kevin Warsh, it's a little bit of it's confusing, right? What he's spoken about globalization and being against protectionism, those are 10, 15-year-old comments. I want to know, what would he say today? Because you base your answer on what's the current economic landscape is. We could say the same for Rowan. We don't know these kinds of where he falls on that too.
All the while, there's an ethics committee meeting getting underway right now, House Ethics Committee, on whether to release this report into Matt Gaetz. Whether they do or not, senators who are preparing to deal with this confirmation are now requesting the FBI file on Matt Gaetz, which is going to be, I presume, the next fight here. Capitol Hill seems to be evolving a little bit. We're hearing a few more people express concern about specifically this pick, if not Pete Hegseth already. Is Mar-a-Lago evolving, or does Donald Trump still say, clear all my nominees, I have a mandate?
Yeah, I love talking about ethics in Washington.
Yeah.
But, Donald Trump's public comments show that he is standing by his choice for Matt Gaetz as Attorney General.
It's as simple as that.
Well, and perhaps more evidence of that, Matt Gaetz is currently being paraded around Capitol Hill by current Senator and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance for meetings. I guess it's just a question of to what extent there's progress in.
Well, to be in some of those meetings.
Yeah, to be a fly on the wall.
There are some senators who had very different feelings about Matt Gaetz, who said that he shared salacious videos with them in the cloakroom and so forth. These are the kind of conversations that are being had, which is taking a lot of the attention away from some of the other picks that we're obsessed with here on Bloomberg, like commerce, like Treasury. You giving Treasury until next week? What's your
I'm really hoping, just for my own personal safety, that it's this week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're all on board with it.
Today's interview day.
Really nice.
Today's interview day.
All right, perfect. Saleha, thank you so much. Saleha Mosin with us, reporting for Bloomberg. On the transition, with our political panel ahead next, Kaylee, we're balancing both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue today, which we haven't mentioned, by the way, not once yet. Joe Biden.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
82 years
82
old.
years old. A lot has changed since his last birthday.
Yes, of course, he's celebrating that birthday, having just returned from the G20 in Brazil, one of his last big foreign trips as president of the United States. And on that note, we do have more coverage in geopolitics to discuss with what's happening in Ukraine and the ongoing war in Russia. So stick with us on Bloomberg.
All right. So we're going to go to the Times Radio about Ukraine and Tomahawk missiles. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. Resveratrol is really important as an antioxidant, but also helps to get rid of senescent cells. In addition, it is synergistic with C60. You should be taking this every day. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the resveratrol as part of the anti-aging protocol that I have. And I've added to my stack NAC. NAC helps to increase the glutathione levels. Glutathione is really important as an antioxidant. It's another pathway. It's synergistic with C60 to soak up those free radicals. In addition, NAC helps to detoxify your liver and your kidney, especially if you have to take acetaminophen. And NAC helps to reduce anxiety, all right? And helps the body go into a parasympathetic instead of a sympathetic mode. So please go to my store and get the NAC, boost up those glutathione levels and soak up those free radicals. It is synergistic with C60. You should stack them together.
Talking about finding a peace negotiation, so they're not looking for this either. But Trump has also said, you know, if the Russians don't play nice on negotiations, we may have to arm Ukraine that's never been armed before. At that point, tomahawks might be something they would consider. I think it's time for people who understand the situation to start talking about arming Ukraine appropriately.
Now, the US has closed its embassy in Kyiv over fears of a significant airstrike. Other embassies have also closed, including those of Spain, Italy, and Greece. It comes days after Washington allowed Ukraine to use these long-range missiles to strike targets inside Russia. Let's talk about all of this and more with a former US ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbs. John, a very good afternoon from us in London. Tell us about your experience and inform us as to what would happen. You worked in this embassy building. What sort of air defences would normally be protecting it?
Well, I don't think there are any special air defenses for the building, although I've been out of the State Department for 14 years, so I don't have the most up-to-date information. But by and large, Kyiv does have effective air defense. Effective means they're able to destroy the vast majority, over 90% of missiles and drones coming in, but sometimes things get through. And so now we have these intel reports, I guess, I haven't seen them, of a massive Russian airstrike approaching or happening soon. So I think this is a natural precaution, which is nothing more than precaution for the safety of the personnel at the embassy and other embassies in Kyiv.
What sort of response would you expect from Washington if the embassy was hit?
You know, I have long advocated a stronger, bolder policy in supplying Ukraine with weapons. And we've seen a pattern since the big invasion began of the Biden administration dilly-dallying on necessary weapons because, in fact, they've been intimidated by Putin's nuclear threats. We should have in hand a plan to send more weapons, more advanced weapons. You know, it's ridiculous that people talk about the ATACMS as long-range strikes because they only go 180 miles. We should, in fact, be giving Ukraine tomahawks that can go 1,000 miles. That would be striking strategic targets in Russia. Ukraine needs to make this war end sooner.
Right. Why do we know so much about the kind of missiles that are being involved and called in this campaign? Because actually, President Zelensky has said kind of enough talking about the exact range of the missiles and stuff like that, because it kind of plays into Russia's hands a bit, doesn't it? Into their propaganda machine.
It does a little bit, but I mean, you know, these things are not deeply classified, not classified at all. People understand the ranges of major American weapon systems, and for that matter, the weapon systems of other countries. But we keep hearing the phrase deep strike because that's how the White House has briefed the press, because they've been intimidated again by Putin's nuclear threat. So people say, oh, deep strikes into Russia, oh my goodness. But 180 miles is not a deep strike into a country that's 9,000 miles from east to west and several thousand miles from north to south.
Yeah. The other longer range missiles that you were talking about, Tomahawks and the like, John, I mean, do you think that those will be okay by America at some point under the tail end of this administration, under a new one?
There's no way in the world that the Biden administration would go for this now. I think the Trump administration is talking about finding a peace negotiation, so they're not looking for this either. But Trump has also said, you know, if the Russians don't play nice on negotiations, we may have to arm Ukraine that's never been armed before. At that point, tomahawks might be something they would consider. I think it's time for people who understand the situation to start talking about arming Ukraine appropriately.
Right. What is the likelihood, though, of that happening under President Trump? I mean, he made as part of his mandate a promise that he would be able to bring peace, not he would be able to arm Ukraine more.
Well, he has said in the few comments he's made on this that he wants Ukraine to be flexible in reaching a deal, and he's mentioned territorial compromise in that connection, and he's willing to deny aid to Ukraine to make them amenable. He's also said Putin needs to reach an understanding, which leads to a decent peace, a stable peace, not the Russian conquest of Ukraine. And if the Russians are not willing to do that, he may need to arm Ukraine instead of been armed before. And right now, if you pay close attention to the reaction in Moscow to things coming from the incoming administration, it's almost entirely negative about the peace plan.
Can I ask you for your thoughts as well?
Be Nuevo Vallarta on a whole new level. Be wonderful.
On Miro, teams work faster on the new Innovation Workspace. Innovation belongs on Miro.
Can I ask you for your thoughts as well, Mr. Hurst, about the kind of people who Donald Trump is surrounding himself with? I mean, particularly the potential of the new Defense Secretary being Pete Hegseth. Do you have very many thoughts about him?
I don't know him. I mean, I've seen him on TV before, but I have an excellent group of colleagues, a couple who've had contact with him, and they tell me he is sound regarding the major strategic dangers to the United States, which include especially China and Russia. So his outlook is, I think, is somewhat similar to Rubio's, our Secretary of State designate, and Waltz, the person who will become the National Security Advisor, who again are sound on these threats, even though Hegseth does not have the substantial experience that Rubio or Waltz have had.
Yeah. Is there a danger, though, that given we are sailing into such uncharted territory at the moment with our geopolitics, that actually you create vulnerability by simply giving such a large job to somebody who is quite untested, who might have controversy around them? That's just giving ground to America's enemies, isn't it?
I think that the controversy regarding Hegseth is understandable, given the fact he's not had the sort of blue chip experience on national security issues that normally defense secretary nominees have. But if his instincts are sound, he's obviously a smart man, and he has the right advisors, he can do a splendid job. So I'm not going to argue against him because his experience is on the lower side. If he was, ignorant regarding our enemies, regarding the threats America faces, I would say, yeah, we don't need this gentleman. But he's seen, again, I'm told he is sound on these issues, so that makes me comfortable with his nomination.
What do you think will happen over the next couple of weeks, Mr. Hurst?
Well, I think, Putin issued another nuclear threat in connection with the decision made by Biden at last on the ATACMS. I'm reasonably, can never be absolutely certain, but he has been bluffing all along with nuclear threats. We've crossed his supposed red times many, many times without result. But I think this, major airstrike on Ukraine, which has led to the closing of several embassies in Kyiv, may be his response to this. So we'll see more of these type of bloodthirsty tactics, which are aimed at civilians and energy infrastructure. Beyond that, I don't expect much. And I would just hope that, again, if somehow any embassy was hit, that we have something planned in terms of a new package of things for Ukraine that will do damage to Russian aggressors in Ukraine and on Russian soil.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon. That is former US Ambassador to Ukraine, John Hurst.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase. This helps with your cardiovascular health. Nattokinase is a fibrinolytic enzyme that helps to break up clots, but it also can help bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. Very important. And as we age, it's important to maintain muscle mass and increase muscle mass. Get myotrol. Myotrol will help to build muscle, maintain muscle, also improve the health of your mitochondria. That will have the ATP to maintain the muscle and to build the muscle. If you're athletic, take myotrol. This will help with your recovery and to improve your performance. This has lignans in it, which brings down inflammation, which will help with the recovery, right? It's also an antioxidant. So when you're working out, it's soaking up those free radicals. It has flavonoids and polyphenols in it. And when you do this together, then you're going to be able to build muscle. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you're older, take the myotrol. And if you're an athlete or semi-pro or just recreational athlete, take myotrol to help with building up muscle and for your recovery. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the myotrol. All right, what's going on
of education, but she's going to need congressional approval, or he will, to make that happen. In the meantime, it seems there's some low-hanging fruit, according to the initial analysis here, Jeannie, stopping schools from promoting inaccurate and unpatriotic concepts about American history surrounding institutionalized racism. That sounds like critical race theory. Also expanding voucher programs that direct more public funds to parents to spend on homeschooling, on religious schools. Do you see all that happening in the first 100 days?
Yeah, I don't see the dismantling for the reason you mentioned. They would need to overcome the filibuster, be very hard to do. And I do see her pushing for school choice. She will follow in the tradition of Betsy DeVos, who was devoted to that as well. The Senate is thinking on the GOP side of a tax credit in that direction. So I think she may see some movement there. But the issue of this CRT, or the critical race theory elimination, the cultural changes they're talking about, raises a really important question. What if the state of Massachusetts decides it wants to teach CRT? Are they going to use the department that they're talking about closing then to force the state not to teach it? I think they've got to make a choice. Are they for returning education to the state level, the local level? Or is it only returning it to the state and local level when the state is doing what this Christian nationalist movement in?
Forget about the state authority issue. CRT is paving the road for reparations. Shut down CRT and you shut down reparations. It's that simple.
Or really do attempt to dismantle it and hope that they can get Congress to go along.
Well, to Jeannie's point, if they're going to go through making it or returning it to the states, that would be somewhat consistent with what a conservative principle would be, smaller government. But to then enforce their will, what they want the states to do, that then is a contradiction and would be entirely hypocritical to then have that stance as well. So you can't have it both ways, pick one or the other. But I think also this idea that they're going to be able to do this in the first 100 days, really they have the 2 years, if you think about it, because there will be a referendum in 2 years, essentially, if people are liking the way that the things are going with the Trump administration or not, when we have another round of House votes and they'll get to weigh in. So it's really a matter of 2 years, essentially, to push through as much as they can or would like to get done.
It's time to start running for the midterms now, Maura. Would eliminating the Department of Education, Maura, be good for America?
Yes.
I can't say that I think just full out dismantling it, but I do think, and this is something that you're starting to see people realize, there needs to be some accountability across the departments of, an audit. A lot of funds have been used in ways that we don't even know about. So having a little more transparency and a look into what each department is spending money on, I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think it's something that we, as the American people who are funding a lot of this stuff with their taxpayer dollars, should know what's being spent. So I think doing a deep dive on these departments is a positive step, and it's something that we should be okay with as a country that is severely in debt.
All right, Maura Gillespie, and Jeannie Shanzano, our political panel today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're getting more reporting now out from our team here at Bloomberg about what exactly the second White House could look like and who could be in it, what kind of roles they could.
Go there, S&P 500 is trading at 5,883, and the VIX is at about 18, and the Euro USD pair is trading at 1.052. Oil continues to go down. It's trading at 68.98.
This is Bloomberg.
Oh, they're on a break. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite helps to remove heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. It's important to detoxify your body. You can take the zeolite every day. If you're going to take it every day, take a couple drops underneath your tongue, drink it with filtered water, just small drops, just 2 small drops a day, and drink it with filtered water. You do that year round. Some people do a detox once or twice a year, and for people like that, then what you do is you take a few drops, put small drops underneath your tongue, maybe 4 or 5, and then drink it with filtered water. And you do that each day until the bottle is done, and do that once or twice a year. But this zeolite you can take year round. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, soak up those heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. You can remove forever chemicals over time by using zeolite. But what's also important is you need to filter your water. You got to stop ingesting these chemicals. So filter your water and make sure you stop eating foods that are processed, and increase the quality of the food that you're eating. Stay away from a lot of restaurants. They don't have very high quality food. So you're better off cooking at home. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. And lastly, digestive enzyme complex. Reduce that stress on your pancreas. All right, when you eat, your pancreas creates enzymes to break up your food. Digestive enzymes have those enzymes in it to reduce the stress on your pancreas. As we get older, our pancreas starts to age. So we're going to need some help. So take the digestive enzyme complex on a daily basis to break up the carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins that will help you to absorb your nutrients. And in addition, if you work out, if you're taking digestive enzyme complex, this will help with your recovery, to fuel your body in your post-recovery. So take the digestive enzyme complex if you're older and you want to reduce the stress on your pancreas. But if you're working out, you can also take digestive enzyme complex to help with your recovery. In addition, this has proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. That was important in 2020. And also it has bromelain in it, which is fibrinolytic, to help break up clots. And this is synergistic with nattokinase. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. Structural nanosilver toothpaste is very important to take. This is a very high quality product. All right. Has no fluoride in it. Has structural nanosilver to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize pathogens, reduce gum irritation, and help with the gum line. And over time, by having good oral hygiene, you're reducing your chances for cardiovascular disease, and you're reducing your chances of valvular disease. A lot of people don't understand that poor oral hygiene does exacerbate cardiovascular disease and valvular disease. So please go to my store, get the structural nanosilver toothpaste, and improve your health. This is the best toothpaste you're going to buy. So help support me by getting a few tubes of this toothpaste and help support your oral hygiene. Please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. And it's important to take max 35 or max 14 on a daily basis. I take a teaspoon a day. How this works is you just take a teaspoon, gargle with it, swish it in your mouth for 30 seconds or so and swallow it. It's neutralizing pathogens, it's maintaining that mucosal barrier and improving your oral hygiene. And by doing that on a regular basis, you're boosting up your immune system. All right. Structural nanosilver is important. It's one of the pillars for my anti-aging protocol. So get the max 35 or the max 14, take a teaspoon a day. In the cold season, if you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the max 35 or max 14.
The S&P right now at 58.80. It is down 37 points, a decline there of 0.6%. NASDAQ lower by 163 points. NASDAQ, the composite index, down 0.9%. Dow Jones Industrial Average now down 108, down by 0.3%. 10-year at 4.41%. The 2-year 4.30%. Spot gold up 0.6%, 26.47 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude 69.15 a barrel, and a record for Bitcoin today was trading above 94,000. Right now at 93,650. Bitcoin up by 1.5%. Bottom line here: stocks trading lower as investors digest the latest Ukraine-Russia tensions. We're also awaiting Nvidia after the bell. Nvidia shares ahead of earnings, down now by 1.7%. Yes, complete coverage. We've got you covered on both Bloomberg Television and radio. Ford is open.
That's the end of my transmission. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great supplements that I offer. Help support my work by making sure you subscribe to all my channels. And please improve your health. All right? Take my advice. Follow my protocol. Get the supplements. Take it regularly. And you're going to notice major improvements. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.